Hi viewers, you are listening the Alpha King's Untold Stories, romantic audiobooks that will make your heart race, and you will enjoy it a lot. Don't forget to subscribe for more enchanting love tales. The ancient forest of Eldergrove did not welcome wanderers. It existed under a perpetual twilight, where silver-barked trees clawed at a sky forever caught between sunset and moonrise. The air here hummed, a deep, resonant thrum of power that made human teeth ache and skin prickle with warning. It was a place of breathtaking, deadly beauty, a borderland between the mortal realm and the world of the Fae, and its guardians did not suffer trespassers. Yet, on this evening, a trespasser arrived. Her name was Elara. She stumbled into a small clearing, her breath ragged clouds in the chill air, her boots worn to mere scraps of leather, sinking silently into a carpet of luminous moss. At 23 winters, she carried the weight of twice that age. Her cloak, once of vibrant emerald, had faded to the gray of forgotten tombstones. Her pack held little, a waterskin nearly empty, some hardened journey bread, and a small, carefully wrapped book of pressed wildflowers, the last remnant of a life torn away. She had been running for 6 months. Banished, the word still burned like a brand on her soul. Her village had turned on her with the swift, brutal cruelty of the fearful. Their gratitude for her healing touch, the way fevers broke at her whispered songs, the way barren gardens bloomed under her care, had curdled into suspicion, then accusation. Witchcraft. The verdict was swift, the punishment exile, with stones and curses hurled at her retreating back. She had walked until her body screamed for mercy, until the memory of their hateful faces blurred, seeking only distance from the world that rejected her. This forest had not been her destination, but when the shadows between the trees deepened into a tangible gloom, her legs simply gave out. The clearing offered a strange sort of shelter. Massive, gnarled roots formed a natural alcove, like a skeletal hand cupped protectively. Exhaustion, her only constant companion, demanded surrender. With trembling hands, she gathered what dry wood she could find. The forest seemed reluctant to give up the dead, as if even fallen branches were sacred. She managed a meager pile. A spark from her flint, a coaxing breath, and a small flame sputtered to life. Its glow was a defiant speck in the immense, watchful dark. It cast dancing, elongated shadows against the silver trunks, creating phantom movements at the edge of her vision. For a single fleeting moment, cupping her hands near the fragile heat, she felt a whisper of safety. She was utterly, completely alone. Or so she believed. High above, where the branches wove a tapestry against the star-dusted sky, he watched. Kaelin, king of the Silverwood, had ruled his hidden realm for over 400 years. No mortal had ever penetrated this deep into Eldergrove and lived. The forest itself was the first and greatest guardian, weaving illusions to turn back the malicious and scattering the footsteps of the merely lost, depositing them, confused and weary, back at their borders. Yet this young woman, she had walked straight through barriers that should have repelled her, past ancient wards that should have clouded her mind into terrified retreat. She had moved with a quiet, weary grace, her fingers brushing bark not with conquest, but with a sorrowful reverence, as if apologizing for her intrusion. He should have summoned his guards. He should have descended in a display of terrifying majesty and commanded her immediate departure. The laws of his people were clear, forged in the bitter fires of old betrayals. The forest was forbidden. But he did not move. He remained perched on a limb as thick as a castle pillar, his form as still as the ancient wood itself. His hair was not merely silver, it was the pale gleam of starlight on frost, falling past shoulders clad in robes of deepest twilight blue, embroidered with patterns that shifted like crawling mist. A circlet of living silver, grown from his own essence, rested upon his brow. His eyes, the color of a glacial lake under a winter sun, observed the scene below with a potent mix of curiosity and something deeper, something long dormant. Perhaps it was the profound loneliness that radiated from her like a chill, a loneliness he recognized in the hollow chambers of his own immortal heart. Perhaps it was the careful, gentle way she extinguished her fire, scattering the ashes and smoothing the ground, as if to leave no trace of her passage. She unrolled a thin, patched blanket and lay down within the root cradle, her form slight and vulnerable. As sleep finally claimed her, her breathing softened into the rhythm of the night, and Kalen stayed. He told himself he was assessing the threat. He told himself he was waiting for hidden accomplices to reveal themselves. But the truth, which he would not yet speak even in the silence of his own mind, was far more dangerous. This lost mortal woman, asleep on sacred ground, made him feel something other than the endless, wearying weight of duty. He made him remember what it was like to wonder. The night deepened. The symphony of the forest rose around her, the melodic call of night birds, the whisper of leaves sharing secrets, the distant chuckle of a crystal-clear stream. Kalen watched, a silent sentinel in the trees, as the stars wheeled slowly overhead. His gaze traced the curve of her cheek, smudged with dirt, the dark auburn hair tangled across her forehead. A strange protective warmth ignited in his chest, an ember glowing in the frozen tundra of his centuries. It was a feeling he had no name for, and it terrified him more than any invading army ever could. For the first time in 400 years, the immortal Elven king was captivated, and the forest, ancient and aware, held its breath around them both, waiting to see what this unexpected meeting would grow. Her village had turned on her with the swift, brutal cruelty of the fearful. Their gratitude for her healing touch, the way fevers broke at her whispered songs, the way barren gardens bloomed under her care, had curdled into suspicion, then accusation, witchcraft. The verdict had been swift, the punishment exile, with stones and curses hurled at her retreating back. She had walked until her body screamed for mercy, until the memory of their hateful faces blurred, seeking only distance from the world that rejected her. This forest had not been her destination, but when the shadows between the trees deepened into a tangible gloom, her legs simply gave out. The clearing offered a strange sort of shelter. Massive, gnarled roots formed a natural alcove, like a skeletal hand cupped protectively. Exhaustion, her only constant companion, demanded surrender. With trembling hands, she gathered what dry wood she could find. The forest seemed reluctant to give up its dead, as if even fallen branches were sacred. She managed a meager pile. A spark from her flint, a coaxing breath, and a small flame sputtered to life. Its glow was a defiant speck in the immense, watchful dark. It cast dancing, elongated shadows against the silver trunks, creating phantom movements at the edge of her vision. For a single, fleeting moment, cupping her hands near the fragile heat, she felt a whisper of safety. She was utterly, completely alone. Or so she believed. High above, where the branches wove a tapestry against the star-dusted sky, he watched. Kalen, king of the Silverwood, had ruled his hidden realm for over 400 years. No mortal had ever penetrated this deep into Eldergrove and lived. The forest itself was the first and greatest guardian, weaving illusions to turn back the malicious and scattering the footsteps of the merely lost, depositing them, confused and weary, back at its borders. Yet this young woman, she had walked straight through barriers that should have repelled her, past ancient wards that should have clouded her mind into terrified retreat. She had moved with a quiet, weary grace, her fingers brushing bark not with conquest, but with a sorrowful reverence, as if apologizing for her intrusion. He should have summoned his guards. He should have descended in a terrifying majesty and commanded her immediate departure. The laws of his people were clear, forged in the bitter fires of old betrayals. The forest was forbidden. But he did not move. He remained perched on a limb as thick as a castle pillar, his form as still as the ancient wood itself. His hair was not merely silver, it was the pale gleam of starlight on frost, falling past shoulders clad in robes of deepest twilight blue, embroidered with patterns that shifted like crawling mist. A circlet of living silver, grown from his own essence, rested upon his brow. His eyes, the color of a glacial lake under a winter sun, observed the scene below with a potent mix of curiosity and something deeper, something long dormant. Perhaps it was the profound loneliness that radiated from her like a chill, a loneliness he recognized in the hollow chambers of his own immortal heart. Perhaps it was the careful, gentle way she extinguished her fire, scattering the ashes and smoothing the ground as if to leave no trace of her passage. She unrolled a thin, patched blanket and lay down within the root cradle, her form slight and vulnerable. As sleep finally claimed her, her breathing softened into the rhythm of the night, and Kaelin stayed. He told himself he was assessing the threat. He told himself he was waiting for hidden accomplices to reveal themselves. But the truth, which he would not yet speak even in the silence of his own mind, was far more dangerous. This lost mortal woman, asleep on sacred ground, made him feel something other than the endless, wearying weight of duty. He made him remember what it was like to wonder. The night deepened, the symphony of the forest rose around her, the melodic call of nightbirds, the whisper of leaves sharing secrets, the distant chuckle of a crystal-clear stream. Kaelin watched, a silent sentinel in the trees, as the stars wheeled slowly overhead. His gaze traced the curve of her cheek, smudged with dirt, the dark auburn hair tangled across her forehead. A strange protective warmth ignited in his chest, an ember glowing in the frozen tundra of his centuries. It was a feeling he had no name for, and it terrified him more than any invading army ever could. For the first time in 400 years, the immortal Elven king was captivated, and the forest, ancient and aware, held its breath around them both, waiting to see what this unexpected meeting would grow. Chapter 2. A King's Dilemma. Dawn approached with a delicate hand, painting the eastern sky in faint washes of rose and lavender. In the clearing, Elara slept on, unaware of the celestial vigil kept over her. Kaelin had not moved from his perch all night. His immortal body did not weary, but his spirit felt a strange new agitation. The rational part of him, the king who had enforced isolation for centuries, screamed that this was a catastrophic breach. She was human, she was a vulnerability, yet the deeper, almost forgotten part of him, the part that remembered songs of starlight and the joy of discovery, whispered otherwise. The forest itself had not rejected her. That was the most confounding evidence of all. Eldergrove was sentient in its own vast, slow way. It reacted to intention. If it had welcomed her passage, shielded her sleep, then she was no ordinary trespasser. As the first true ray of sunlight speared through the canopy, turning droplets of dew into scattered diamonds, Elara began to stir. A soft murmur escaped her lips, a name lost to the morning air. Her hand twitched, as if reaching for something in a dream. Kaelin's breath caught. He watched, utterly mesmerized, as her eyelids fluttered open. Confusion clouded her sleep-softened features for a moment, then stark, waking terror flooded in. She sat up with a jerk, her eyes wide, scanning the clearing wildly. She expected danger, expected monstrous guardians or twisted magic. She found only breathtaking beauty. The silver bark glowed with inner light, flowers with impossible shifting hues dotted the moss, and the air tasted like rain and honey. It was peace incarnate, a peace that felt like a trap. Elara scrambled to her feet, her heart hammering against her ribs. Every childhood tale of these woods crashed down on her, stories of lost souls, of elf-shot arrows, of time twisting until nothing remained but madness. She had to run, now. She gathered her meager belongings with frantic haste, her movements sharp with panic. She made her way to the stream to refill her waterskin, her movements jerky. Kneeling at the water's edge, she caught her reflection. The face that stared back was a stranger's, hollow-cheeked, eyes shadowed by exhaustion and grief, hair a wild nest of tangles. "What have I become?" whispered she to the ghost in the water, her voice cracking. "Just a survivor," a voice answered from behind her. It was not a human voice. It was music and wind and ancient stone, all woven into a resonance that vibrated in her very bones. Elara spun, a cry lodging in her throat, the waterskin falling forgotten into the current. There, at the edge of the clearing where shadow met newborn light, stood a being that stole all thought, all breath. He was tall, impossibly so, with a grace that seemed to defy the very pull of the earth. His hair was a cascade of captured moonlight, and his eyes, they were the heart of a glacier, crystalline and fathomless, holding the weight of ages. The circlet on his brow marked him as royalty, and the power that emanated from him made the very air shimmer like a heat haze. An elf, and not just any elf, the Elf King. Every instinct screamed for flight, but her limbs were locked, frozen in sheer, awe-stricken terror. Kaelin saw the panic in her wide, earth-brown eyes, saw her tremble like a leaf in a storm. He raised a hand, palm open, a gesture meant to calm. "Peace, Elara of the Ashborne line," he said, his voice deliberately soft, yet it carried through the clearing with undeniable authority. "You have nothing to fear from me." She flinched at the sound of her name. You know me?" "The forest knows many things," he replied, an evasion that held truth. "And it has been countless turnings of the seasons since a mortal walked these inner paths without being turned away." His gaze was a physical weight, assessing, curious. I'll leave," Elara stammered, finding her voice thin and reedy. "I didn't mean to trespass, I swear it. I was lost and tired, and I just needed—" Her words tumbled out in a desperate rush. "I will go now, right now, and never return." "Stop." The single word was not loud, but it held a command that halted her frantic speech. Kaelin took a single step forward. She shrank back, and something sharp twisted in his chest. How deeply had the world wounded her to make her recoil from even a gesture of peace? "I did not reveal myself to cast you out," he said, his tone gentling further. You didn't? The forest welcomed you, Elara. The trees gave you shelter. The earth offered you rest. This wood is ancient and aware. It does not grant such comforts to those who carry malice in their hearts." He paused, his head tilting slightly. "The question that burns in my mind is, why? Why does a human woman carrying such sorrow walk so deep into forbidden territory with nothing but despair as her companion?" The directness of the question, the unexpected kindness in those ancient eyes undid her. The wall of fear cracked, and beneath it a torrent of lonely anguish threatened to spill over. She owed this king nothing, and yet— "They drove me out," she whispered, the words dragged from a deep, wounded place.
My village. They called it witchcraft. Everything I did to help, the healing, the growing things, they saw it as a threat. A bitter, broken laugh escaped her. Kindness, it seems, looks monstrous to fearful eyes. Kalen's expression did not change, but in the depths of his icy gaze, something shifted. A spark of understanding, of recognition. You have a gift, he stated, as one would state the presence of the sun. A gift? She echoed, shaking her head. It is a curse. It has made me a ghost in my own life. Not here, Kalen said, and the certainty in his voice was absolute. It was a stone dropped into the still pool of her despair, sending ripples of something she dared not name, hope. Here you are simply one whom Elder Grove has chosen to shelter, and I find myself curious as to why. He moved then, not with the predatory grace she feared, but with a slow, deliberate care. He walked to the stream's edge, knelt, and retrieved her water skin that had sunk. He filled it from the clearest part of the current and extended it back to her. When her fingers brushed his as she took it, a jolt passed between them, not of shock, but of resonance. It was like two matching harp strings, plucked in distant rooms, humming in sudden, perfect harmony. Elara gasped, her eyes flying to his. Kalen's own gaze had widened slightly. He had felt it too. What was that? She breathed. Recognition, he said, his voice now holding a rough, unsteady edge. The magic in you, calling to the magic that guards this place. He rose to his full height, looking down at her with an intensity that stripped away pretense. You are not entirely human, Elara Ashborne. What? The word was a breathless denial. That's impossible. My parents were from the village. I am human. Your parents may have been, Kalen conceded, but somewhere in your bloodline there is another thread, something older, Fae-touched. The gift you carry, the forest's welcome, the reason you have always been a step out of sync with your own world. He let the words hang in the morning air, watching her struggle with the seismic shift they caused. You have a blood of the fair folk, however diluted. It is why your magic manifests in life and healing. It is why you hear the world sing when others hear silence. Elara sank slowly onto a moss-covered stone, her legs unable to hold her. The world tilted, rearranging itself around this impossible truth. All the strange moments of her life, the uncanny knowings, the pull toward wild places, the sense of perpetual exile, suddenly had a name, a terrifying, wondrous name. I don't understand, she said numbly. How could I not know? These lineages can sleep for generations, Kalen explained, his tone that of a teacher, patient and clear. A human ancestor might have encountered one of the fair folk, a pact, a bargain, a fleeting romance. The magic lies dormant until it sparks to life again, sometimes centuries later. He studied her, seeing not just the frightened woman, but the potential shining beneath the weariness. Elara Ashborne, you stand at a crossroads. You can return to the mortal world, hide what you are, continue running, or... He extended his hand once more, not in command, but in solemn invitation. Or you can stay. Allow me to guide you, help you understand the power in your blood. Elder Grove has claimed you, and I am not inclined to argue with its judgment. Elara stared at his offered hand. It was a doorway to an impossible future, to understanding the curse that had plagued her, to perhaps finding a place where she was not a monster. She thought of the cold, lonely road behind her, of the warm, silent peace of the forest around her, of the king who saw her gift, not her danger. Slowly, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs, she reached out. Her fingers slid into his. The moment their palms met, a soft golden light flared at the point of contact, warm and gentle. It traveled up her arm, flooding her with a sensation of rightness, of a door swinging open onto a room she had always sensed but never seen. The wild, frightened magic within her sighed and settled, as if coming home. Kael'n's fingers closed around hers, and for the first time in 4 centuries, the crushing weight of his eternal solitude lightened, just a fraction. "Welcome," he said softly, and the word was a vow, to Silverwood. Chapter 3. The Court of Whispering Shadows. The journey to the heart of Silverwood was a walk through a living dream. Kael'n led Elara along paths that seemed to unfurl before them, through glades where the very air shimmered with latent magic, past trees so ancient their bark was carved with the faces of forgotten spirits. He spoke as they walked, his voice a low, mesmerizing stream of knowledge. "Silverwood is not merely trees and earth," he explained as they crossed a bridge formed from the interlocked antlers of great spectral stags. "It is a consciousness, a collective memory of root and leaf and stone. Every creature, every stream adds its voice to the chorus. That is how it judges. That is how it knew your heart." Elara listened, her senses overwhelmed, drinking in sights and sounds that belonged in legend. She saw flowers that turned their blossoms to follow their passage, small creatures with fur like spun moonlight peering from hollows, and everywhere that haunting, wordless music, the forest's true voice. "Can you hear it?" Kael'n asked, glancing back. "The song of the wood?" I think I can," she whispered, awestruck. "It's like a melody just beneath the wind." "Your blood recognizes what your mortal mind struggles to comprehend. In time, you will understand its words." After a walk that felt both endless and instantaneous, for time, she was learning, was fluid here, the trees began to change. The silver bark grew more luminous, the spaces between trunks more orderly. They were entering a structure grown, not built. Walls of living wood arched overhead, forming a grand natural colonnade. "Behold," Kael'n said, a quiet pride in his tone, "the heart of my kingdom, Aethervale." They emerged into a vast circular courtyard, and Elara's breath caught in her throat. It was a masterpiece where nature and artistry were one. Water danced in fountains against gravity, tracing silver arcs in the air before falling into pools lined with gem-like stones. Gardens thrived, but these were no ordinary plants. Flowers pulsed with their own soft light, vines bore fruit that looked like captured constellations, and trees hummed with a deep, resonant power. And there were elves, dozens of them, moving with an ethereal grace that made her feel clumsy and coarse. They ceased their activities as one. All eyes turned to the human woman standing beside their king. The weight of their collective gaze was a physical pressure, centuries of scrutiny in a single moment. Elara wanted to vanish, but Kael'n's presence beside her was a steady anchor. She lifted her chin, meeting their stares as best she could. An elf woman glided forward, her beauty sharp and severe. Her robes were the deep green of forest shadows, her hair a fall of burnished copper. Her eyes, the color of sun-dappled jade, held a piercing intelligence. "My lord king," she said, her voice crisp as autumn frost, "you return with a guest." "Lady Valeris," Kael'n acknowledged with a nod. "This is Elara Ashborne. She carries the old blood and has been welcomed by Eldergrove itself. She will remain under my protection and tutelage." A ripple of whispers spread through the gathered elves like a sudden breeze. Valeris's gaze swept over Elara, analytical and cool. "Old blood, you say? How intriguing." "The forest does not welcome intruders, Valeris. Its judgment is evidence enough." Another elf stepped from the crowd. Where Kael'n was winter's grace, this one was its harshness. His hair was the white of bleached bone, his features carved from ice, and his eyes held a chill that made Elara shiver. "How uncharacteristic," the elf said, his voice like the crack of thinning ice. "Our king, who has cherished our isolation above all else for centuries, now brings a mortal stowaway into our innermost sanctum? You move swiftly, Lord Kael'n." "Lord Theron," Kael'n's voice gained an edge, a sliver of steel. "Mind your tone." I speak only the concerns that others dare not voice, Theron replied, his cold eyes locking on Elara. This is unprecedented. Our laws, our safety, our very existence here depends on secrecy, on separation. What has changed? The tension in the air thickened, becoming palpable. Elara felt like a bone thrown between wolves. Perhaps I should go, she murmured, taking a half step back. I don't wish to be a cause of discord. You will stay. Kaon's hand found hers, his grip firm and certain. The contact sent that now familiar resonance humming through her, a stark contrast to the hostile atmosphere. You belong here, Elara. Do not let the fears of those who have forgotten how to trust convince you otherwise. The rebuke was clear. Theron's lips thinned. Belong, based on a night in the woods and the whims of sentient trees? He turned his glacial gaze fully on Elara. Tell me, child, what do you know of our history, our laws, the perils that besiege us from the outside world? Nothing, Elara admitted, her voice small but clear. I knew nothing of any of this until today. Honest, at least, Valeris murmured, and there might have been a flicker of approval in her eyes. She speaks truth because she has not been taught deceit, Kaon stated. She sought nothing from us. She asked for no audience, no boon. She simply needed sanctuary, and the forest granted it. The rest is Eldergrove's design. Theron studied them for a long, silent moment, his eyes lingering on their joined hands. You defend her with remarkable passion, my king. You might think your judgment clouded. The silence that followed was absolute, heavy with implication. Elara felt Kaon's hand tighten almost inconceivably around her. My judgment, Kaon said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous register that seemed to still the very air, is that the forest is never wrong. Elara stays. She will be taught. She will be protected. This is not a council matter. It is my decree. The finality in his tone was unmistakable, the voice of a king who would brook no dissent. One by one, the elves inclined their heads, though Theron's bow was shallow, his expression promising this was not the end. Valeris approached Elara, her demeanor shifting to something marginally warmer. Come, child, if you are to remain, you cannot wander Aethervale in those travel-worn rags. She gestured for Elara to follow. Elara glanced at Kaon, who gave a slight, reassuring nod. Reluctantly, she released his hand and followed Valeris through an archway of flowering vines. Once they were away from the courtyard, Valeris's posture relaxed a fraction. Pay Lord Theron no mind, she said, her voice lower now. He has been an advisor since Kaon's grandfather's time. He views any change as decay, any new face as a threat. He fears what he does not control. I don't want to be a problem, Elara said earnestly.
Conflict is not inherently evil, Valeris replied, a hint of a smile touching her lips. Sometimes it is the storm that clears stagnant air. We have been sleeping here, Elara, for a very long time, going through the motions of eternity without truly living it. She paused before a door that was part of a massive living tree. Our king has borne the weight of that sleep alone. And then you arrived, and for the first time in centuries, I saw something in his eyes that was not duty, nor weariness, nor regret. She pushed the door open. The chamber within was circular, grown from the living wood of the tree itself. A bed of soft moss and woven spider silk sat in one corner, furniture curved from still-growing branches, and a wide window looked out over the breathtaking canopy of Silverwood. These chambers have been empty for an age, Valeris said. Make yourself at rest. I will have suitable garments brought. You will dine with the court tonight. Why are you helping me? Elara asked suddenly. You don't know me. I could be a danger, just as Lord Theron hears. Valeris turned at the doorway, her jade eyes thoughtful. Because Eldergrove chose you, and I have learned, over many long years, to trust its wisdom. Because Kalen looks at you as if he has found something he thought lost forever, and because you remind me of what it is to be new to this world, and afraid, and yet still standing. She gave a final slight nod. Welcome to Aethervale, Elara Ashborne. I have a feeling you are about to turn everything we know upside down. The door closed softly, leaving Elara alone in the heart of a tree, in the heart of an elven kingdom, the impossible truth settling around her like a cloak. She was here, and something told her the real journey was just beginning. Chapter 4: Whispers and Weavings. The days in Aethervale unfolded like the petals of some strange, slow-blooming flower. Each morning, Elara woke in her chamber of living wood, the dawn light filtering through the window in shafts of liquid gold, and for a moment she would forget. Then the reality would crash in, the impossible beauty, the ancient magic thrumming in the air, the fact that she was a guest, a student, a curiosity in the court of the Elven king. Her education began in earnest. Kalen was a patient, if demanding, teacher. Their lessons took place in a secluded glade near the heart tree, a being of such immense, silent power that Elara could barely look upon it directly. Magic is not about force, Kalen instructed on her third day, his voice calm and measured. It is about resonance, about listening. Your gift for life, for growth, it is a song your spirit sings. You have been singing it loudly, desperately, without knowing the melody or the words. You must learn to listen first. He taught her to still her mind, to reach out not with her hands, but with her awareness. At first, she felt nothing but her own frantic heartbeat and the overwhelming presence of the king beside her. But then, gradually, she began to sense it, the slow, deep pulse of the earth, the bright, chattering energy of the plants, the ancient, dreaming consciousness of the trees. It was a symphony of life, vast and complex, and it terrified her with its intensity. "It's too much," she gasped one afternoon, pulling her awareness back like touching a flame. Kalen's expression was unreadable. "They are not screaming, they are speaking. Your human senses are overwhelmed because you are trying to hear every voice as a separate shout. Do not listen to the words, listen to the music beneath. Find the harmony." It was during one of these exercises that the first true twist of her power manifested. Frustrated, her brow furrowed in concentration, she had placed her palms on the mossy ground, trying to sense the root songs of a young sapling. Instead of listening, she poured her frustration into it, a silent, desperate wish for it to understand her struggle. The sapling shivered, then, before their eyes, it grew, not the slow, seasonal reaching of a tree, but a sudden, silent surge, branches elongated, leaves unfurled with a soft, rustling sigh, its trunk thickening until it stood a head taller than its neighbors. The moss around it erupted in a circle of tiny, star-like blue flowers that had not been there moments before. Elara snatched her hands back as if burned, staring in horror. "What did I do?" Kalen was staring at the tree, his glacial eyes wide with something akin to shock. You communed, but with desire, not receptivity. You asked, and the world answered. He turned his gaze at her, and the shock was now mixed with a fierce, blazing pride. "Do you see, Elara? This is not petty witchcraft. This is the deep magic of creation. This is what slumbers in your blood." The incident did not go unnoticed. Word of the human woman who could make trees grow with a touch spread through Aethervale in hushed, urgent whispers. It earned her wary looks from some, like Lord Theron, whose cold disdain seemed to deepen into something more calculating. But from others, like Valeris, it earned a new, grudging respect. Valeris took on the task of teaching Elara the labyrinthine ways of the Elven court. These lessons were in many ways more daunting than magic. Lord Theron leads the traditionalist faction, Valeris explained as they walked the palace gardens one afternoon, the air sweet with the scent of phantom blossoms. He believes our strength lies in absolute separation from the mortal world. Any contact is contamination, any change is decay. Your presence here is a direct challenge to everything he advocates. And you? Elara asked cautiously. What do you believe? A rare, genuine smile touched Valeris's lips. I believe that a tree that does not bend in the wind will snap. We have been rigid for too long, Elara. Our numbers dwindle. Our joy fades. We preserve, but we do not live. Kaelin knows this. It is why the burden of kingship has weighed so heavily upon him. He is a guardian of a fading dream. You, Elara, are a new dream, and that terrifies those who have grown comfortable with the quiet despair of the old one. She looked at Elara, her gaze piercing. You remind me of what it is to be new to this world, and afraid, and yet still standing. She gave a final, slight nod. Welcome to Aethervale, Elara Ashborne. I have a feeling you are about to turn everything we know upside down. The door closed softly, leaving Elara alone in the heart of a tree, in the heart of an elven kingdom, the impossible truth settling around her like a cloak. She was here, and something told her the real journey was just beginning. Through it all, Kaelin was her anchor. He would lean over, his shoulder brushing hers, to explain a subtle point of etiquette or identify a rare dish. His proximity sent that now familiar hum of resonance through her, a quiet, steadying constant in the sea of unfamiliarity. He never touched her beyond these necessary gestures, but his attention was a palpable thing, a shield against the worst of the court's chill. One night, after a particularly tense meal where Lord Farron had pointedly questioned the security risks of untamed human magic near the heart tree, Elara fled to the solitude of her chambers. She stood at the window, looking out at the star-strewn canopy, feeling more alone than she had in the desolate human roads. A soft knock sounded at her door. It was Kaelin. He did not enter, simply stood at the threshold, his tall frame silhouetted by the soft hall light. You left abruptly, he said, his voice low. I couldn't breathe in there, she confessed, not turning from the window. Every look feels like a judgment. Every word feels like a test I'm failing. He wants me gone, and half the court agrees with him. Theron's influence is born of fear, not wisdom, Kaelin stated, moving to stand beside her at the window. He kept a respectful distance, but she could feel the energy that always radiated from him. He fears you because you represent change, and change is the one force even an immortal cannot control. What if he's right, she whispered, finally turning to look at him. In the moonlight filtering through the leaves, his features were both majestic and strangely vulnerable. What if my being here is a danger? What if my magic is wrong? Kaelin's gaze held hers, intense and unwavering. Elder Grove does not make mistakes, Elara. I have spent 4 centuries learning that lesson. It saw in you what we all had forgotten to look for, a connection, a bridge, not a threat. He hesitated, a rarity for him. The energy in you is not wrong. It is wild, yes, untrained, like a young river that has broken its banks, but its essence is pure creation. It is the same song the heart tree sings, only in a different key. He reached out then, not to touch her, but to gesture at the world outside the window. Listen, not with your magic, just listen. She did. Past the hammering of her own heart, she heard it, the night song of Silverwood, the distant, melancholic cry of a night bird, the whispering conversation of leaves, the deep, almost sub-audible hum of the sleeping earth. It was a lullaby of immense age and profound peace. "They are not judging you, Elara," murmured Kaelin. "They are simply observing, learning your song as you are learning theirs. Give them time. Give yourself time." His words were a balm. The tight knot of anxiety in her chest loosened. In that quiet moment, standing beside him in the silver dark, she felt not like a trespasser or a student, but simply like herself, seen, understood. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion she couldn't name. He nodded, a slight, graceful motion. "Rest. Tomorrow we begin a new lesson, one I think you are ready for." A ghost of something, anticipation, flickered in his eyes. "We will speak with the heart tree." He left as silently as he had come. Elara remained at the window, the forest's song now a comfort, not a mystery. Kaelin's faith in her was a lantern in the dark, but as she looked out at the ancient, watchful wood, a new, subtle whisper threaded through the harmony, a note of discord, faint but unmistakable. It felt like a warning, cold and sly, slithering through the roots from somewhere deep in the direction of Lord Farron's quarters. The forest knew many things, and it was telling her that the king's protection, however powerful, might not be enough to shield her from the storms gathering in the shadows of Aether Vale. Chapter 5. The Heart Tree's Secret. The day dawned with a hushed expectancy, the very air of Silverwood holding its breath. Today was not for listening to the general chorus of the forest. Today, Kaelin informed her, she would be introduced to the conductor of that symphony, the heart tree itself. Elara dressed with trembling hands, the simple elven garments feeling both alien and strangely rightful. Valeris arrived to escort her, her usual composed demeanor touched with a rare gravity. "The heart tree is not merely a tree, child," she cautioned, as they walked through the still sleeping pathways of Aether Vale. "Its roots bind our magic to this world. Its consciousness is vast. Do not seek to speak, only be open. It will show you what it wills." They met Kaelin at the edge of the innermost grove, a place so dense with magic that the light fractured into rainbows and the air tasted of ozone and old earth. The heart tree dominated the space. It was impossible to gauge its true size. The trunk was wider than a castle tower, its bark not silver, but the deep, shifting gray of thunderclouds shot through with veins of pulsating gold. Its branches, lost in a canopy of glowing leaves, seemed to hold up the sky itself. A profound silence reigned here, deeper than mere absence of sound. It was the silence at the center of a storm. Kaelin stood before the immense roots, which rose from the earth like petrified waves. He turned to Elara, his eyes holding none of their usual glacial distance. Instead, they were alight with a fierce, almost protective intensity. "Place your hands upon the root," he instructed, his voice a low vibration in the sacred quiet. Swallowing hard, Elara stepped forward. The energy radiating from the tree was a physical pressure against her skin. She knelt, her knees sinking into moss as soft as velvet. With a final, steadying breath, she laid her palms flat against the rough, warm bark. The world dissolved. It was not a vision seen with eyes, but an experience poured directly into her soul. She was everywhere at once. She felt the slow, stretching growth of roots delving miles into the dark earth, tasted the minerals they drew up, felt the patient, centuries-long conversation between stone and wood. She felt the sun on a million leaves, the caress of wind, the patter of rain. She felt the lives that depended on this one being, the burrowing creatures in its roots, the birds in its branches, the elves whose very essence was interwoven with its magic. And she felt its memory. Images, sensations, emotions flooded her. She saw Silverwood in its youth, vibrant and wild. She saw the first elves not as the aloof, majestic beings she knew, but as creatures of luminous wonder, laughing as they coaxed palaces from living trees. She felt the heart trees' joy in their companionship. Then came the shadow, a cold, greasy darkness, foreign and hungry, seeping in from the mortal world, not the simple fear of villagers, but a calculated, consuming malice, a hunger for magic itself. She saw glimpses of a human figure, hooded and obscure, wielding tools that scarred the land, draining life from lesser trees, seeking a way into the heart of the wood. The heart tree's fear was a sickening lurch, a mother sensing a predator near her nest. The memory shifted. She saw Kaelen, centuries younger, his face less lined by weary solitude, standing guard with a company of elven warriors. She felt the heart tree's trust in him, its reliance. She witnessed a great warding being woven, a barrier of light and will that pushed the creeping shadow back, sealing Silverwood away from the world. The cost was isolation. The cost was the slow fading she now witnessed in the elves' spirits. The heart tree's sorrow was a deep, abiding ache. And then she saw herself, not as she was now, but as a spark in the endless tapestry of time, a thread of familiar magic, distant but clear, woven into the human world. The heart tree's attention focused on that thread with a sense of profound, patient waiting. She felt its recognition the moment she entered Eldergrove, not as a trespasser, but as a lost piece of itself, finally returning home. The warmth of that welcome was overwhelming, a love so vast and unconditional it brought tears to her eyes even in the vision state. But woven through that welcome was a new thread of urgency. The shadow was not gone. It slept, but it stirred. The old wards were fraying with age and disuse. The heart tree was weary. It needed new strength. It needed a bridge. The connection broke with the suddenness of a snapped cord. Elara gasped, stumbling back from the root, her hands flying to her chest as if her heart might burst. She was on her knees, shaking, tears streaming down her face. Strong hands caught her shoulders, steadying her. Kaelen, he was kneeling before her, his face etched with concern. Elara, breathe, you are safe. She showed me, Elara choked out, the words tangled with sobs. The shadow, the one that attacked before, it's still there, it's waiting. And she's so tired, Kaelen. Kaelen's hands tightened on her shoulders. His face went pale, the regal mask crumbling to reveal stark alarm. What did you see? Tell me exactly. In halting, broken phrases, she described it, the malignant hunger, the hooded figure, the scarring of the land, the fraying wards. She told of the heart tree's exhaustion, its longing for the vibrant connection it had lost. Kaelen released her and stood, turning to stare at the immense tree, his back rigid. A terrible silence stretched between them, broken only by Elara's shuddering breaths and the eternal quiet hum of the grove. It is called the Blight, an old enemy, a perversion of magic from the mortal realm. We believed it vanquished, sealed away by the great ward 400 years ago. If the heart tree says it stirs—" Kayellen turned back to her, his eyes now blazing with a cold, deadly fire. "Then Theron's fears are not entirely unfounded. Your arrival, the awakening of your magic, it could be acting as a beacon, not for good, but for that ancient hunger." Elara felt the blood drain from her face. "You mean I let it here?" "No," Kayellen said sharply, cutting off her spiral of panic. "The blight is drawn to power, to life. Your presence did not summon it. Your potential may have reminded it that we are here and that we are vulnerable." He began to pace, a restless, predatory motion. "This changes everything. The wards must be reinforced, the borders patrolled. Theron will use this to demand your removal, claiming you are a catalyst for disaster." "What do we do?" Elara whispered, feeling small and terribly mortal. Kayellen stopped his pacing and looked at her, his storm in his eyes settling into a grim, determined resolve. "We do not run, we prepare. The heart tree showed you this for a reason, Elara. It did not show you your own death. It showed you a threat, and it showed you itself. It believes you are part of the solution." He knelt before her again, his gaze locking onto hers with irresistible force. "Your magic is life. The blight is death. They are opposites. You must learn, and learn quickly, not just to listen to the song, but to sing it back, to strengthen the chorus. You must learn to heal not just a plant, but the land itself." The weight of it was crushing. She was a refugee, a student of a few weeks, and he was asking her to become a warrior in a war she barely understood. "Can I even do that?" Her voice was a thread of sound. "You must," Kayellen said, and there was no room for doubt in his tone. "For if you cannot, then the blight will find the cracks in our defenses, and it will consume Silverwood, the heart tree, my people, and you." He stood, offering her his hand. It was not a gesture of comfort, but one of alliance, of shared burden. "The game has changed, Elara Ashborne. Your lessons are no longer about control, they are about survival. Are you ready?" Elara looked from his extended hand to the immense, weary heart tree, feeling the echo of its ancient fear and its stubborn, lingering hope. She thought of the cold eyes of Lord Theron, of the whispering court, of the shadow waiting in the world beyond. She had run from fear her whole life. Here, there was nowhere left to run. With a trembling that came deep within her soul, she placed her hand in his. The resonant hum between them felt different this time, not just recognition, but a pact, a solemn vow. "I'm ready," she said, and for the first time she almost believed it. But as Kayellen led her from the grove, already speaking of intensified training and hidden lore, Elara glanced back one last time. The veins of gold in the heart tree's bark pulsed once, slowly, like a faint, fading heartbeat. And in that pulse, she sensed not just urgency, but a secret, a truth the tree had shown her that she had not yet fully understood, a truth about her own bloodline, about the spark it recognized that was somehow tied to both the blight's origin and its only possible end. The heart tree gave her a warning and a weapon, but first she had to discover what and who that weapon truly was. "The ward is weakening here. The blight's presence is a poison, a slow seepage. You must learn to sense its touch, to distinguish its hollow hunger from the true song of life." Elara closed her eyes, extending her awareness as he'd taught her. The vibrant chorus of Silverwood was muted here, like music heard through a thick wall. And beneath it, there was a vibration that made her teeth ache. It was not a sound, but an absence, a cold, pulling void that seemed to drink the light and warmth from the very air. A shiver that had nothing to do with the temperature raced down her spine. "I feel it," she whispered, her voice tight with revulsion. "It's hungry." "Remember that feeling," Kalen commanded, his own features tense. "It will try to disguise itself, to mimic weariness or natural decay. You must see through the illusion." He placed a hand on the menhir, and a pulse of his own potent magic, clean and sharp as winter air, washed over the stone. The sickly yellow in the runes flared, then receded slightly, brightening to a pale, determined white. The effort cost him. A fine sheen of sweat appeared on his brow. "Reinforcing them is a temporary measure, a stopgap. We need to understand how it is penetrating them at all." Lord Theron, of course, had his own theory. At the next council gathering, held in a chamber of woven thorn and obsidian, he did not bother with subtlety. "The evidence is before us," he declared, his voice cracking through the tense silence like ice. He pointed a long, accusatory finger not at Kalen, but directly at Elara, who sat silently beside the king. "For centuries the wards held firm. Our isolation was our shield. Then she arrives, immortal, yes, but one pulsing with untamed, unfamiliar magic, and suddenly our borders grow thin, the heart tree whispers of ancient nightmares returning. This is no coincidence, my lords and ladies. Her blood is a key that is unlocking the very doors we sealed." A murmur of unease rippled through the assembled elves. Elara felt their eyes upon her, the earlier curiosity now hardening into suspicion and fear. She wanted to shrink into the chair, to disappear. "Enough, Theron." Kalen's voice was quiet, but it carried a finality that silenced the room. He did not raise his hand, did not raise his voice, but his authority was a cloak that settled over them all, heavy and absolute. "The blight stirred in fleeting whispers long before Elara crossed our borders. I have felt its probing touch for decades, a faint itch at the edge of our consciousness. Her arrival did not awaken it. Her potential may have drawn its sharper attention. That is not an accusation. It is a fact of war. She is not the cause. She may well be a crucial part of the defense." Theron's pale eyes glittered with cold fury. "Defense? You would place the security of our entire realm on the untested human instincts of this stray? Her magic is chaos. She makes trees erupt from the ground on a whim. What happens when that chaos touches the wards? What happens when her human fear reacts to the blight and does something catastrophic?" The question hung in the air, poisonously potent, because it was the very fear that lived in Elara's own heart. What if she did make a mistake? Valeris spoke then, her calm, analytical tone a balm after Theron's vitriol. "Lord Theron speaks of chaos. I have observed discipline. Rapid, yes. Unorthodox, certainly. But the growth she prompted was not destruction. It was accelerated life. The heart tree itself welcomed her. Are we, in our fear, to argue with the wisdom of our realm's anchor?" "It is not wisdom, it is vulnerability," Theron shot back. "The tree is weary, its judgment perhaps clouded by its own desire for the strength this girl represents. We must rely on cold logic, not the hopeful dreams of ancient wood." The council dissolved into heated, hushed arguments. Elara sat frozen, the weight of their debate pressing down on her. She was a pawn in a game she didn't understand, a symbol of either hope or doom. Kalen listened to it all, his expression a mask of regal impassivity, but Elara, sitting so close, could see the tightness around his eyes, the slight clench of his jaw. The burden of kingship, of making an impossible choice, was carving new lines into his ageless face.
After the council, Kaelin did not escort her to her chambers. Instead, he led her to the palace archives, a vast, silent library where knowledge was stored not in books, but in crystals, in pools of memory water, and in the very fragrance of preserved leaves. "We cannot fight an enemy we do not understand," he said, his voice echoing softly in the hallowed space. "Farron is a traditionalist, but he is not a fool. His fear has a root. The blight was born of mortal greed, a perversion of natural law. If your blood connects to it somehow, we must know how." He stopped before a pedestal holding a large, cloudy crystal. "This holds memories of the last great incursion. They are not pleasant to behold, but you must see." With a touch, the crystal cleared. Images, sharper and more harrowing than the heart tree's gentle showings, flooded Elara's mind. She saw not a hooded figure, but armies of men wielding tools that smoked with foul energy, tearing at the edges of a younger, less hidden Silverwood. She saw elves falling not to swords, but to a withering curse that turned their luminous skin gray and brittle. She saw the desperate, brilliant flash of the great warding being cast, a spell that required not just magic, but a sacrifice, a willing elf pouring their essence into the pattern to make it permanent. She felt the echo of that elf's agony and resolve. And then, in the fleeting moment before the ward sealed, she saw something new. A human woman, separate from the armies, her hands glowing not with destructive energy, but with a frantic, healing light. She was trying to stem the corruption, to save a patch of forest. Her face was twisted in grief and determination. And her features, there was a haunting, undeniable echo in the shape of her eyes, the curve of her brow, an echo Elara saw every day in her own reflection. The connection snapped. Elara stumbled, gripping the pedestal for support. Who was she? Kaelin's face was grave. Her name was lost, a hedge witch, some accounts say, a healer who stood against the tide of her own people's destruction. She was killed when the ward was cast, the backlash of such powerful, purifying magic meeting the blight's corruption was fatal to any mortal caught between. He paused, watching her absorb the horror. Your magic feels hers, Elara, not the blight's. Hers. You are not a key to the prison. You carry the spark of the one who tried to mend what was broken. Relief, sharp and sweet, washed through her, followed immediately by a crushing sorrow for that ancestral woman. So Farron is wrong.
About your intent, yes, Kaelin said slowly, but not about the connection. The blight is a perversion of life magic. Your ancestors' power was its pure form. They are two sides of the same coin. The blight may sense you not as a key, but as its natural opposite, its greatest threat, and a threat must be eliminated. He turned to face her fully, the archive's dim light casting deep shadows on his face. This is why you must learn faster than any student ever has. You must learn to wield your birthright not as a gentle gardener, but as a warrior of life. You must become the light that burns away the shadow. For if you do not, the blight will not rest until the last echo of that healer's power, until you are extinguished. The truth was a double-edged sword. She was not the cause, but she was the target. Her training was no longer just about survival. It was about becoming a weapon of growth, of healing, of pure, defiant life, to be aimed at a darkness that wanted to consume all. That night, in her chamber, Elara did not look at the stars. She looked at her own hands, pale in the moonlight, hands that could make flowers bloom and trees grow, hands that now had to learn to fight. The heart tree's secret was unfolding. She was not a random stray, she was a legacy, and legacies, she was beginning to understand, were not gifts, they were battles waiting to be fought.
The shadow was stirring, and it knew her name. The only question that remained was whether the mortal girl with fey-touched blood could learn to wield her inheritance before the darkness came to claim it. Chapter 7. The Broken Ward. The tension in Aethervale was a taut wire, humming with unspoken fear. Kaelin's patrols doubled, then tripled, their movements swift and silent through the border woods. Elara's training intensified until her body ached and her mind felt raw, stretched thin from channeling more power than she ever thought possible. Kaelin taught her to shape her magic into shields of woven vine and light, to sing melodies that strengthened growing things against imagined corruption, to feel for the subtle, sickly signature of the blight like a hound on a scent. It was during one of these grim lessons, at the northernmost menhir, that the fragile peace shattered. The runes on the stone were not just glowing with a sickly yellow, they were bleeding a dark viscous substance that smoked where it touched the moss. The air reeked of ozone and rotting petals. Kaelin's face turned to stone. "It's here," he breathed, his hand going to the hilt of the long, slender blade at his side, a weapon Kaelin had never seen him draw. "It's testing the ward, now." Before he could issue a command, a deafening crack split the air, not from the stone, but from the forest beyond it. The sound was wrong, like 1,000 bones breaking in unison. The vibrant green of the trees just past the border visibly dimmed, leaching to a sickly gray-brown in a spreading wave. "The ward is breached." Kaelin's voice was a shout now, raw with alarm. He grabbed Elara's arm, his grip iron. "Stay behind me. Do not engage it directly. Your magic is life. Its touch is death. It will consume you." From the gray wasteland, figures emerged. They were not men, not beasts, but terrible parodies of both, twisted forms of root and claw, with eyes like dying embers, moving with a jerky, horrifying purpose. The Blight Walkers. At their center stood a taller figure, shrouded in a tattered cloak the color of dried blood. No face was visible within the hood, only a deeper darkness from which 2 pinpricks of malevolent green light glowed. The cloaked figure raised a hand, and a wave of that chilling null energy, that hunger, rolled toward them. The very grass between them withered to ash. Kaelin moved. He was a blur of moonlight and shadow, his blade flashing with a pure silver radiance. Where it cut, the Blightwalkers shrieked, like tearing metal, and dissolved into foul-smelling sludge. He was magnificent, terrible, a force of nature himself. But there were too many. They flowed around him, their attention fixating not on the Elven king, but on Elara. They sensed her. They hungered for her. Terror threatened to paralyze her, but beneath the terror, a new instinct sparked, not the gentle urge to grow, but a fierce, defensive need to protect. As the first walker lunged, claws extended, she didn't think. She threw her hands out. A wall of thorns erupted from the earth, not the delicate brambles of the forest, but vicious iron-hard spikes that impaled the creature mid-leap. It writhed, shrieking, before falling still. The effort left her gasping, but there was no time to rest. Another came, and another. She spun, her movements clumsy compared to Kaelin's grace, weaving barriers of quick-grown wood, tangling roots to trip her foes, singing a single piercing note that made the flowers at her feet explode in a cloud of blinding, purifying pollen. She was not elegant, she was desperate, but she was holding her own. Kaelin cut his way towards the cloaked figure, his focus absolute. "Face me, abomination. Your quarrel is with Silverwood." The figure let out a grating laugh that held no mirth, only void. "Silverwood is a vessel. I seek the spark within, the healer's echo. Give her to me, and the trees may yet stand a little longer." Never. The word was a vow etched in frost. Their clash was not of swords, but of opposing magics, Kaelin's silver light against the Blight's consuming shadow. The air screamed around them. Elara, fending off another walker, saw Kaelin falter. The cloaked figure's power was a vortex, draining, sucking at his strength. The king's radiant light dimmed. In that moment of distraction, a Blightwalker she hadn't seen slammed into Elara from the side. Claws raked her arm, and agony, cold and invasive, shot through her arm. It wasn't just pain, it was a numbness, a silencing of the song inside her. She cried out, falling to one knee. The sound broke Kaelin's concentration. He glanced her way, his eyes widening in horror. It was the opening the cloaked figure needed. A whip of solidified shadow lashed out around Kaelin's blade arm. He roared in pain as the dark energy seared his skin, the silver light of his weapon sputtering. "No," Elara screamed. The numbness in her arm was spreading, but her core blazed with a new emotion, furious, protective rage. This darkness was hurting her forest. It was hurting him. She dug her fingers into the wounded, ashen earth. She didn't ask for growth. She demanded it. Power erupted from her, not a controlled stream, but a geyser of life energy, raw and blindingly bright, shot through the corrupted ground. Where it traveled, gray turned to green, not slowly, but in an explosive rebirth. Grass, flowers, saplings burst forth, not just living, but fighting. Their roots speared upward, piercing the Blightwalkers from below, their pollen falling like acid rain on the shadow stuff.
The cloaked figure recoiled, hissing as the wave of purifying life reached its feet. The whip around Kaelin's arm dissolved. With a final, furious cry, Kaelin drove his blade forward. It did not pierce cloth and flesh, but passed through the figure as if through smoke. The cloaked form shattered into a million fragments of darkness that scattered like fleeing insects, leaving behind only a fading, hate-filled whisper on the wind. The remaining Blightwalkers, bereft of their master's will, collapsed into inert piles of rot. Silence descended, broken only by Elara's ragged sobs and the gentle, miraculous rustle of new leaves in the once dead zone. She knelt, clutching her wounded arm, which throbbed with a deep, icy ache. Kaelin was at her side in an instant. He dropped his sword, his hands trembling slightly, cradling her injured arm. His own forearm was badly burned where the shadow had touched, the skin blistered and blackened. "Elara, your arm." "It's cold," she whispered through chattering teeth. "So cold." His face was ashen, not from pain, but from fear. He placed his good hand over the wound. A different kind of magic flowed from him, cool, gentle, a soothing balm of moonlight. It pushed against the invading chill, not eliminating it, but containing it. The numbness receded, leaving behind a fierce, clean pain. The bleeding stopped, the claw marks sealing into angry, dark red lines. He stared at the marks, his expression grim. "The corruption is deep. I have halted it, but I cannot purge it, not with my magic." He looked into her eyes, his own filled with a storm of emotions. Awe, terror, gratitude. "What you did, that surge of power, it was a mess," she finished weakly, a hysterical laugh bubbling in her throat. "I didn't know what I was doing. I just didn't want it to hurt you." His gaze softened, just for a fraction. "It was the most powerful act of defensive magic I have witnessed in centuries. You did not just grow plants, Elara. You commanded life itself to become a weapon against death." He helped her to her feet, supporting her weight. "But the cost," he looked again at the dark lines on her arm. "The blight has marked you. It knows your signature now, and it has seen what you can do." The elven guards arrived then, led by a grim-faced Valeris who took in the scene, the healed breach, the newborn grove amidst the corruption, their wounded king and the marked human with widening eyes. "The ward is sealed for now," Kalen said, his kingly mask slipping back into place, though he did not release his support of Elara. "But it was a probe, a test, and we have shown our hand." He looked at Elara, then at the council members who had gathered, Farron among them, his face unreadable. "The war is no longer a whispered fear. It has begun, and Elara Ashborne is not our weakness." He lifted her marked arm gently, the dark lines a stark contrast against her pale skin. "We protect her, we train her, or Silverwood falls." As he spoke, Elara leaned against him, exhaustion and pain washing over her. She had fought, she had survived, but as she looked at the inky lines now etched into her skin, a permanent reminder of the enemy's touch, she knew the truth. The battle at the border was just the beginning. The Blight had tasted her power, and it would be back, not for the forest, not for the king, for her. The silent, watchful eyes of the court, especially the cold, calculating gaze of Lord Theron, promised that the dangers within Aethervale might now be as perilous as those lurking beyond its broken wards.
Is that what you believe? Or is that what Lord Theron has very cleverly led you to believe? Valeris asked, her sharp eyes missing nothing. He plays a long game, Elara. He cannot directly defy Kalen, not yet, so he sows doubt, fear. He makes you doubt yourself so others will doubt you. He wants you to run, or to break. Either outcome serves his purpose, the removal of the unsettling new variable from his stagnant equation. Elara looked at her, a flicker of defiance cutting through the fog of despair. "What should I do then? I can't fight his words. I can't make this mark go away." "No," Valeris agreed, "but you can stop letting it define you. You are not the mark. You are the one who survived it. You are the one whose power made a wasteland bloom. That is your truth. Wear it. Let them see it." She leaned closer. "Kalen shields you because he must, because he is king, but a shield can also be a cage. You must learn to stand with him, not just behind him, starting tonight." "Tonight?" "The moonful gathering. The entire court will be there. It is a ceremony of unity, of remembrance. You will attend, not as a hidden secret, but as Elara Ashborne, marked, yes, but present, unbroken." The thought sent a fresh wave of terror through Elara, to stand before them all with the evidence of her corruption plainly visible. It was a nightmare. Yet the steel in Valeris's voice was undeniable. That evening, Valeris herself helped Elara dress, not in the concealing, high-necked gowns she had begun to favor, but in a dress of deep forest green, with sleeves that fell gracefully to her elbows. The dark, twisting lines on her forearm were exposed for all to see. Valeris arranged Elara's hair simply, leaving her face bare, her eyes, shadowed by fear and fatigue, impossible to miss. "There," said Valeris, stepping back. "No mask, no pretense. Let them see the cost of the battle we are in." The great glade was transformed. Thousands of floating orbs of soft white light hovered like captive moons. The elves were gathered, resplendent in silks and living flowers, their voices a low melodic murmur. As Elara entered on Valeris's arm, the murmur died. Every head turned, every eye went first to her face, then, inevitably, dropped to the stark, ugly mark on her arm. A ripple of shock, of discomfort passed through the crowd. She saw pity, fear, disgust. She wanted to fold her arms, to hide, to run. Then she saw Kalen. He stood at the center of the glade, upon a natural dais of root and stone. He was dressed in robes of purest white, a silver circlet gleaming on his brow. His gaze found hers across the distance, and he did not look at the mark. He looked into her eyes. He gave a slow, deliberate nod, not of pity, of recognition, of shared resolve. It was enough. She lifted her chin, following Valeris through the parted crowd. The walk to the dais felt like miles. Whispers trailed in her wake. "The blight mark. How can she be here among us?"
the king's blind spot. She reached the base of the dais. Kaelin extended his hand not to help her up, but in formal greeting. She placed her hand in his, the marked skin pale against his. The usual resonance was there, but muted, as if the mark dampened it. He did not flinch. He held her gaze. "Welcome, Elara Ashborne. You stand with us, bearing a scar taken in Silverwood's defense. Let no one mistake a scar for a stain. It is a testament, a reminder of the darkness we face and of the light that stood against it." It was a public declaration, a rebuke to every whispering tongue. He turned to address the court, but kept her hand in his, a united front. The moonful reminds us of our connection to each other, to this wood, to the cycles of life and protection. Tonight, we remember that connection is not without cost. It requires courage. It requires standing together, even when fear would drive us apart. As he spoke of unity and vigilance, Elara stood beside him, the exposed mark feeling less like a brand of shame and more like a battle standard. She was still afraid, the mark still pulsed with its silent menace, but she was not hiding. Theron, she noticed, stood at the front of the crowd, his expression unreadably smooth, though his eyes were chips of ice. The ceremony proceeded with songs and offerings of light. When it came time for the communal vow, Kaelin raised their still joined hands. "We vow to protect the heart of the wood, and all who dwell within its shelter." The elves echoed the vow, their voices a wave of sound. Elara spoke the words, her own voice small but clear. In that moment, holding the king's hand before his entire people, marked by the enemy, she felt a shift. She was not an outsider begging for shelter. She was part of this, for better or worse. The blight had marked her, but Silverwood had claimed her. After, as the gathering dissolved into quieter socializing, Kaelin finally released her hand. "That took great courage," he said quietly for her ears only. "It was Valeris's idea," she admitted. "But it was your will that carried it through." He looked at her arm, his gaze turning clinical. "The mark is quiet tonight. It's always quiet. It's just there, waiting." "Then we will not wait idly," he said, his voice hardening. "Tomorrow we begin a new search, not just for a cure, for an offense. The archives hold secrets of old magics, weapons of light and growth from the First Age. If the blight wants the healer's spark, we will forge that spark into a sword." As he led her away from the dais, Kaelin caught Lord Theron watching them. He offered a shallow, perfectly correct bow to his king, but his eyes, as they flickered over Elara's exposed arm, held not fear or disgust, but something far more unsettling, a keen, calculating interest, as if the mark wasn't a problem to be solved, but a piece on a board that had just been moved to a more useful square. The chill that ran down her spine then had nothing to do with the blight, and everything to do with the enemy she could see, smiling politely in the moonlight. Chapter 9. The Forgotten Forge. The search for a weapon became an obsession. Days blurred into nights in the silent, dust-moated depths of the oldest archives, far below the living palace of Aethervale. Here, knowledge was stored in ways that defied mortal understanding, in the scent of a petrified leaf that released visions when warmed by breath, in the silent, shifting patterns of sand in sealed hourglasses, in crystals that sang fragments of history in voices like cracking ice. Kaelin was a relentless guide. The quiet king she had first known was gone, replaced by a general poring over maps of a war only he could fully see.
His focus was absolute, his patience endless, as he taught Elara to navigate the esoteric cataloging system. "We seek anything related to Sunsteel, Dawnforge, the bloom of final defense," he murmured, his fingers tracing symbols on a stone tablet that glowed at his touch. "Weapons not of metal, but of concentrated life. Concepts from the time when our magic was younger, wilder, less refined." Elara's role was to listen. Her connection to life magic, even with the dampening mark on her arm, acted as a dowsing rod. She would hold a crystal or breathe on a leaf and wait. Most showed nothing, or fragments too brief to comprehend. Flashes of battles, glimpses of beautiful, terrible weapons of woven light. Her frustration grew with each dead end. The mark on her arm seemed to pulse in time with her discouragement, a mocking reminder of the threat they raced against. It was on the 5th day, in the deepest, coldest chamber, that she found it. Not a weapon, but a clue. It was a simple thing, easily overlooked, a smooth river stone, unmarked, sitting on a pedestal as if someone had placed it there yesterday and forgotten it. It called to her, not with magic, but with a profound, aching sense of memory. "Kaelin," she called, her voice echoing in the stillness. He was beside her in moments. "What is it?" "This stone, it feels sad." He picked it up, turning it over in his long fingers. "It holds no enchantment I can sense." He handed it to her. "Try. Listen to its story." She cradled the cold stone in her palms, closing her eyes. Instead of pushing her awareness out, she let it sink in as she had with the heart tree. The stone was not a recording crystal. It was a keystone, a trigger. The archive around her dissolved. She was no longer underground. She stood in a sun-drenched clearing, but the light was wrong, too bright, too harsh, leaching the color from the world. In the center of the clearing stood an elven woman of impossible grace, her hair like spun sunlight. Her face was etched with a sorrow so deep it was a physical presence. Before her, on a simple anvil of white wood, lay not metal, but the living heartwood of a sacred tree, pulsing with a soft golden light. "It cannot be forged with hammer and flame," the elf woman whispered, not to Elara, but to the memory itself. "It must be sung into being, a song of such pure creation that crystallizes life itself into a form that can cut through the anti-life, the unmaking." Tears traced silver paths down her cheeks. The vision shifted. The clearing was now under attack. The same graying blight she had seen before crept at the edges. The elf woman, the smith, was singing now, a melody that tore at Elara's soul with its beauty and its grief. The heartwood on the anvil began to glow, taking shape, a long, slender blade of what looked like solidified sunlight, veined with living green. As the final note hung in the air, the smith placed her hands upon the blade. Her brilliant light flowed into it. She did not scream. She faded like mist in morning sun, her essence becoming one with the weapon. The blade flashed with a final triumphant radiance, then went dormant, looking like little more than a beautiful branch of gold-flecked wood. The name came to Elara then, not as a sound, but as a knowing. Aurora's promise. The memory stone grew warm in her hands, then crumbled to harmless dust. She opened her eyes back in the archive, her tears streaming down her face. Kaelin was staring at her, his own expression stark. "You saw it," Kaelin stated. "The Dawn Forge," Elara breathed, the words tasting of sunlight and sacrifice. "It's not a place, it's a song, a weapon of life, forged from a life. She gave herself to make it." She looked at him, horror dawning. "Kaelin, we can't, no one can ask for that." "Aurora," Kaelin whispered, the name a ghost on his lips. "My great-aunt. Her fate was a mystery. She vanished at the time of the first blight. The histories said she fell in battle. She did not fall. She became the weapon." His gaze sharpened, focusing on Elara with terrifying intensity. The blade, Aurora's promise, what became of it? The memory stone had shown no more. "I don't know. The vision ended." "It must have been used. It must be here somewhere. A weapon like that would not have been destroyed. It would have been hidden."
He began to pace, his mind racing. A blade that can cut the blight, forged by a queen of life magic, tempered with her very soul. It is the legend Siron spoke of, the pure creation that can burn shadow without harming the light. But it requires a wielder, Elara said, the implications settling over her like a lead weight. Someone whose magic resonates with it. Someone like her descendant. Kaelin stopped pacing. He looked at her, at the mark on her arm, at the tears still drying on her cheeks. The hope in his eyes was a terrifying thing. You carry her line, Elara. Not directly, but the magic is the same. The heart, the spark. The heart tree recognized it. The blight hunts it. And Aurora's promise was made for it. The pieces were falling into a dreadful, perfect pattern. She was not just a target, she was the intended heir to a weapon of unimaginable power and cost. We have to find it, Kaelin said, his voice vibrating with new purpose. If it still exists, it is our only hope. It can cleanse your mark. It can turn the tide of this war. The search narrowed, became frantic. They scoured records of armories, of hidden vaults, of tombs. They found nothing. It was as if the blade had vanished from history after its creation. It was Valeris, summoned to help, who offered the chilling alternative. She listened to their description in silence, her face growing pale. There is a place not in the archives, a place of forgetting, the Whispering Vault. It is where we enter things too dangerous, too sorrowful, or too potent to be remembered. Access is forbidden by royal and council decree. Only the king and the High Counselor together can open it. The High Counselor was Lord Theron. Kaelin's face darkened. Theron would never agree. He would see the blade as a threat, or worse, a tool he could control. Then we do not ask him, Elara heard herself say. The words surprised even her. We find another way. Both elves stared at her. The wards on the vault are ancient and terrible, Elara, Valeris warned. They are designed to repel, to confuse, to trap. It is not a library, it is a prison for objects.
And I am an object the forest welcomed, Elara countered, a strange calm settling over her. The memory of Aurora's sacrifice burned in her mind. This was her legacy, her burden. Waiting for permission, for politics to align, would mean failure. My magic, it doesn't work like yours. It doesn't confront barriers. It persuades them. It finds the life in everything, even stone. She looked at the mark on her arm. The blight is coming back. We don't have time for councils and debates. Kaelin studied her for a long, silent moment. He saw not the frightened girl, but the resolute woman she was being forced to become. The woman who had regrown a dead grove in a heartbeat. It is a terrible risk, he said finally. If you are caught, Theron will have the grounds he needs to demand your exile, or worse. The vault's protections could kill you. Staying here, waiting for the blight to come for me with only half answers and political enemies at my back, that will kill me too, Elara said, her voice steady. Aurora gave everything to create a chance. I have to at least try to find it. The silence in the archive was profound. The decision hung between them, heavier than any crown. Finally, Kaelin gave a single grave nod. We will need a distraction, a reason for Theron and the entire court to be looking elsewhere. A plan, dangerous and daring, began to form in his eyes. The Moonfire Dance is in 2 nights. The entire court will be in the Great Glade. The vault's guard will be at its thinnest. He looked at Elara, his gaze solemn. You will have one chance. Valeris will guide you to the outer seal. The rest will be up to you and the forest. Alara's heart hammered against her ribs, not with fear now, but with a fierce, defiant certainty. They were no longer just searching for a cure, they were racing to reclaim a lost legacy from a tomb of forgotten sorrows. And she was the key. Whether that key would unlock their salvation or their doom, she did not know. But as she looked at the dust of the memory stone on her hands, she felt the echo of Aurora's song, a song of ultimate sacrifice, and she knew, with a chill that went to her bones, that to wield such a power, she might have to learn its final, devastating verse. Chapter 10: The Whispering Vault. The night of the Moonfire dance arrived, wrapping Aethervale in a blanket of enchantment and deliberate distraction. The great glade pulsed with otherworldly light, the air thick with the scent of night-blooming jasmine and the complex, haunting melodies of elven flutes. Every citizen, every guard, every courtier was drawn to the spectacle, a tradition of such importance that absence was unthinkable. It was the perfect veil. Elara waited in the shadows of the palace's deepest roots, a place where the living wood gave way to ancient, cool stone. She wore dark, close-fitting garments Valeris had provided, her marked arm covered by a tight sleeve. The mark itself seemed to hum with a faint, anticipatory buzz, as if sensing the powerful, sleeping magic they sought. Valeris appeared like a green-tinged ghost. "The way is clear to the outer seal," she murmured, her voice barely a breath. "2 guards remain at the vault entrance. They are loyal, but the dance song has a soporific quality tonight. They will be inattentive. Remember, once you pass the living wards, I cannot follow. The path is one way until you return with the artifact, or not at all." She placed a hand on Elara's shoulder, a rare gesture of contact. "The forest walks with you, child. Listen to it, even in that dead place." With a final tight nod, Elara followed Valeris through a series of descending, narrow passages, hewn not by tools but by the slow persuasion of water and root. The vibrant song of Silverwood faded, replaced by a deep, mineral silence. The air grew cold and still. Finally, they reached a blank wall of seamless black stone, etched with a single complex rune that emitted a soft silver glow, the outer seal. As Valeris had predicted, 2 elven guards stood post, but their eyes were distant, their heads subtly nodding to the far-off rhythm of the dance. Valeris gestured to a nearly invisible crack in the stone, where a thin rivulet of water traced a path downward. There, where the water goes, the wards are meant to repel conscious intrusion. They pay less mind to the patient, mindless flow of life. Your magic must be like the water, a request, not a demand. Elara placed her palms against the cold stone beside the trickle. She closed her eyes, pushing away the thrum of fear and the buzz of her mark. She thought not of breaking in, but of joining, of being part of the stone's immense, slow history. She poured her awareness into it, feeling its age, its solidity, its purpose to protect. She whispered to it, not with words, but with the essence of her magic, a gentle, persistent offer of kinship, of shared guardianship. For long, agonizing moments, nothing happened. Then, the stone beneath her palms grew warm, the silver rune flickered, the seamless wall shimmered, and the crack widened, not with a grind of rock, but with the silent, fluid motion of illusion parting. An opening, just wide enough for her to slip through, appeared where solid stone had been. She glanced back. Valeris gave her an encouraging nod, her face pale with tension. Without another thought, she slipped into the darkness. The whispering vault was not a room, it was a pocket of reality that felt severed from the world above. The air was bone-dry and tasted of dust and old magic, a stale, oppressive contrast to the vibrant life of Silverwood. She stood in a circular space, its walls lined not with shelves, but with niches, each holding a single object suspended in a bubble of faint gray light. And the whispers, they were everywhere. Not voices, but impressions, emotions bleeding from the sealed artifacts. From a cracked mirror in one niche, a wave of narcissistic rage pulsed. From a simple wooden flute in another, a dirge of bottomless grief. A rusted dagger emitted a continuous, silent scream of betrayal. This was a gallery of cursed objects and regretted power. The pressure of so many concentrated negative energies was a physical weight. The mark on her arm flared with a sudden, sharp cold, resonating with the darkness around her. It was a struggle to breathe, to think. She forced herself to focus, to seek not with her eyes, but with the spark inside her. She was looking for a song of sacrifice and light in a choir of despair. She moved slowly through the concentric circles of niches, her skin crawling. The whispers pressed in, tempting, threatening, mourning. "Take me," urged the mirror. "Play me," sighed the flute. "Forget," hissed the dagger. Then she felt it, not a whisper, but a silence, a perfect, profound silence, emanating from a niche at the very heart of the vault. Within its gray bubble lay not a glittering sword, but what looked like a long, straight branch. It was about the length of her arm, the wood a deep, rich brown shot through with veins of dormant gold. It was beautiful in its simplicity, but utterly inert. Aurora's promise. As she approached, the whispers around her rose to a fever pitch, as if trying to drive her away from this one pure thing. The cold in her mark intensified, a warning shard of ice in her veins. She reached a trembling hand towards the bubble of containment. The moment her fingers touched the gray light, the vault changed. The whispers coalesced into a single, coherent voice, dry and ancient and furious. It was the consciousness of the vault itself. "Intruder, mortal tainted, you carry the mark of the unmaking. You may not touch the promise." The voice was in her mind, crushing in its authority. The gray light around the branch hardened, pushing her back. "I am not the unmaking," Elara gasped aloud, pushing against the psychic pressure. "I am here to fight it. The promise was made for my blood." "Blood is weak. Blood is corruptible. The mark proves it. You would tarnish the sacrifice. You would break the promise." Images flooded her, not visions from the artifact, but fears from the vault. It showed her wielding the branch, the gold veins glowing not with pure light, but with the sickly green of the blight, the weapon turning in her hand to destroy the heart tree itself. It was the vault's deepest terror given form. "No!" Elara cried, tears of frustration springing to her eyes. She pressed her marked arm against the barrier. "This mark is a wound, a battle scar. It is not who I am. She sacrificed herself to make a weapon of life, not to have it wrought in a tomb of fear." She poured her will into her words, into the core of her magic. She didn't try to overpower the vault's will. She showed it. She showed it the memory of the dead grove bursting back into life. She showed it her terror as the Blightwalkers came for her, and her defiant rage as she fought back. She showed it Kaelin's burned arm, his unwavering faith. She showed it the heart tree's weary hope. "I am not perfect," her soul cried out to the ancient guardian. "I am scared and marked and mortal, but I am here and I am willing." Is that not what she was? Willing? The psychic pressure hesitated. The visions of corruption flickered. The vault's consciousness seemed to consider. It was ancient, born of caution and sorrow, but it was also born of the same desire to protect that had fueled Aurora. "The risk is total," the voice sighed, a sound like shifting continents. "If you fall, the weapon falls with you. The enemy wins." "If I do nothing, we all fall," Elara whispered, her strength fading. "Please, let me try to keep her promise." There was a long, silent eternity. Then the gray bubble of containment simply popped. The branch settled into her waiting hands. It was warm, not the heat of a fire, but the gentle, living warmth of bark on sunlight. The dormant gold veins pulsed once, softly, as if a sleeping heart had beat. There was no sudden surge of power, no blinding light, just a profound, quiet rightness, a sense of a circle closing after centuries. But the triumph was short-lived. As she turned, the branch clutched to her chest. The entrance she had come through was gone. In its place was only seamless black stone. The vault had let her take the weapon, but it had not promised her a way out. The one-way path was now her prison. Panic, cold and sharp, lanced through her. She was trapped in the whispering dark, with only a dormant branch and a hostile, sentient tomb for company. The vault had given her the key, but it seemed it had also decided her fate, to keep its secret forever, weapon and wielder together in eternal guardianship. Outside, the moonfire dance would be ending. Kaelin and Valeris would wait, and slowly realize the vault had swallowed her whole. The blight mark on her arm gave one final icy throb, a mocking echo in the perfect silence. She had found the legend. Now she had to find a way to make her own. Chapter 13. The Price of a Promise. Time lost all meaning in the whispering vault. The oppressive silence was broken only by the relentless, murmuring tide of the artifact's trapped emotions. Elara sat on the cold stone floor, Aurora's promise resting across her knees. Its warmth was a small, stubborn defiance against the chill of the tomb and the deeper cold radiating from the mark on her arm. She had tried everything. Pushing her magic against the walls resulted only in a weary psychic pushback from the vault itself. Shouting brought no response but the echo of her own desperation. The branch, for all its feeling of rightness, remained dormant. It was a symbol, not a tool. Without a way to awaken it, without a way out, it was just a piece of beautiful, dead wood. Exhaustion, both physical and spiritual, began to claim her. The whispers seeped into her mind, amplifying her own fears. You were a fool. He will forget you. The blight will win. You will die here alone. The mark pulsed in time with the despair, a cold anchor dragging her down. She thought of Kaelin. He would be searching by now. Would he risk confronting Farron, revealing their illicit venture? Would Farron use her disappearance as final proof of her instability, her danger? She had handed him a victory on a silver platter. A fresh wave of grief, sharp and personal, washed over her. Not just for herself, but for the connection she was losing. The quiet understanding in his eyes, the steadying presence of his magic beside hers, the unspoken vow they had made in the heart tree's grove. It had felt like the beginning of something. Now it felt like an end, buried under black stone. Tears, hot and silent, traced paths through the dust on her cheeks. One fell, landing on the golden vein that ran along the center of the branch. It sizzled softly, not with heat, but with a tiny spark of light that raced along the vein before fading. Elara blinked, her breath catching. She looked from her tear to the branch. A sacrifice. Aurora had given her life. What had she said in the memory? A song of such pure creation, a life willingly poured into the blade to give it purpose. It wasn't about blood, it was about offering, about truth. With a trembling hand, she wiped her cheeks and focused on the branch, not on its power, but on its story, on the elf woman who sang her soul into it to fight a darkness she could not defeat alone. Elara poured her own truth into it, not as magic, but as confession. Her loneliness, her fear of the mark, her gratitude for the shelter of the forest, her awe of Kaelin's strength and his hidden vulnerability, her determination, however feeble, to fight.
She didn't sing, she whispered, to the branch, to Aurora, to the vault, listening in the dark. "I'm not her," she murmured, her voice cracking. "I'm not brave like she was. I'm just me, scared, marked. But I'm here, and I want to help. I want to keep your promise. Please, show me how." She placed her hands over the branch, her marked skin directly over the central golden vein. She offered not just her magic, but her fear, her hope, her fragile, mortal will. For a moment, nothing. Then a response. It was not a surge of power, it was a question. A feeling pressed into her mind from the branch itself, gentle as a falling leaf. What do you value above your own life? The true test. The vault had judged her blood tainted. The weapon itself demanded to know her heart. Images flashed before her mind's eye. The heart tree, weary but enduring. Valeris's sharp, unexpected kindness. The silver bark of Eldergrove glowing in twilight. Kaelin's hand in hers, steadying her before his entire court. Her answer was immediate, unshakable. Them, their safety, their home. "And if wielding me means you will never leave this place?" the branch asked, its presence in her mind growing stronger, warmer. "If the only way to awaken me is to join your essence to mine, as Aurora did, becoming a guardian sealed in stone. A true sacrifice, not death in battle, but an eternal, living entombment, a fate far worse than the quick death the blight would offer." Elara's blood ran cold. She looked around at the whispering, joyless vault. To be trapped here forever, with only the echoes of sorrow and regret for company, it was a horror beyond any battlefield. Yet the images remained. Kaelin facing the blight alone, the heart tree falling to gray decay, Silverwood silenced. Tears came again, but they were clean tears of resolve. She bowed her head over the branch. "Yes," she whispered, the word final as a tomb door closing. "If that is the price, to keep the promise, to protect them, yes." The moment the word left her lips, Aurora's promise awoke. The golden veins blazed with a light that was bright but not blinding, warm as a summer dawn. The simple wood grew translucent, as if lit from within by captured sunlight. The whispers in the vault recoiled, silenced by the pure, clean energy now radiating from the center of the chamber. But no life force left Elara, no terrible burning. Instead, the light from the branch flowed into her. It coursed up her arms, meeting the icy corruption of the blight mark. Where light met shadow, a silent, intense battle raged on her skin. The dark lines sizzled, not with pain, but with a sensation of profound unraveling. The cold numbness shattered, replaced by a cleansing fire. She watched, transfixed, as the inky tendrils faded, not just from the surface, but from deep within her magic, dissolving into nothingness under the relentless, gentle dawn of Aurora's power. The mark was gone. Her arm was clean, whole, humming with her own restored magic, now amplified, refined by the touch of the ancient weapon. The branch's voice in her mind was a soft, chiming melody. "You were willing to give your life. That is the key. That is the song. I do not require your death, child of my sister's heart. I require your courage, and you have shown it here in the deepest dark. The sacrifice is in the offering, not the taking. Now, stand." The light from the branch consolidated, focusing into a beam that lanced from its tip, not at the wall, but at the concept of the wall. It did not burn or break, it persuaded. It showed the vault the same truth Elara had shown it, the need, the willing heart, the restored purpose. With a sigh that was the sound of stone dreaming, the wall of the whispering vault dissolved, not into rubble, but into a curtain of shimmering mist, revealing the dark passage beyond. Elara stood, clutching the now gentle glowing branch. She was not a prisoner, she was a wielder, cleansed, chosen. She stepped out of the vault. The mist solidified back into seamless stone behind her. The passage was empty. She hurried back the way she had come, her feet light, the branch a comforting weight. When she emerged into the lower roots, Valeris was still there, her face drawn with hours of worry. Her eyes went wide, first at the sight of Elara, then at the luminous branch in her hands, and finally fixed on Elara's bare, unmarked forearm. "By the stars!" Valeris breathed. "There's no time," Elara said, her voice firm, carrying a new authority. "Where is Kaelin?" "The dance ended hours ago. Theron confronted him about your absence. He accused the king of secreting you away for some dark purpose. Kaelin could not reveal the truth without condemning you both. The council is in emergency session. Theron is moving for a decree of banishment in absentia and for the mobilization of the guard to secure the king from further foreign influence." A cold fury, sharp and clear, rose in Elara. It was not her frantic fear, it was a righteous anger. "Take me to them now." Valeris, seeing the change in her, the light in her eyes and the power humming quietly around her, simply nodded. They arrived at the council chambers to find them in uproar. Kaelin stood at the head of the obsidian table, his face a mask of controlled fury, but Elara could see the harrowed exhaustion beneath it. Theron was speaking, his voice dripping with plausible concern. Her disappearance only proves her instability. The human magic, the blight mark, they were a poison in our midst. Now she flees, perhaps back to the very darkness she drew to our borders. We must. "I fled nowhere, Lord Theron." Every head snapped toward the entrance. Elara walked into the chamber, Valeris a step behind. She held Aurora's promise at her side, its dawn-like glow illuminating the grim faces around the table. A collective gasp went up, not just at her presence or the weapon, but at her arm, bare and clean. Kaelin's breath caught, his glacial eyes locked on hers, and in them she saw a shock so profound it shattered his regal composure, revealing the raw, desperate hope beneath. Theron recovered first, his surprise twisting into cold rage. "You, how dare you interrupt this council? And what is that thing? More stolen magic?" "This," Elara said, raising the branch so its light filled the room, "is Aurora's promise, forged by the sacrifice of the king's own kin to fight the blight, hidden in the whispering vault by those too afraid to use it." She looked directly at Theron. "I entered the vault, I faced its judgment, and I was found worthy. The blight mark is gone, cleansed by its light." The chamber erupted into chaos, cries of disbelief, of awe, of fear. Theron slammed a hand on the table. "Lies! The vault is impregnable. This is some human trick, a glamour." "Enough!" Kaelin's voice cut through the din, powerful and resonant with a new, fierce pride.
He walked from behind the table, stopping before Elara. He did not reach for the branch. He looked only at her face, searching. "Is it true?" She met his gaze, letting him see everything, the terror in the vault, the moment of choice, the cleansing light. "It is true. The weapon is real, and it answers to me." She extended the branch toward him, not to give it, but to show. The war changes tonight. We are no longer just defending. We have a sword. Kaelin looked from the glowing weapon to her clear eyes, and a slow, triumphant smile, the first true smile she had ever seen on his face, touched his lips. It transformed him. He turned to the stunned council, his bearing that of a king who has just found his queen's crown. You see before you not a liability, but a champion, not a human stray, but the heir to Aurora's will. The council is adjourned. We have a weapon to study and a battle to plan. His gaze swept over Theron, who stood fuming, outmaneuvered and exposed. Any further challenge to her place here is a challenge to the legacy of our own heroes and to my crown. Choose your next words very carefully. The silence was absolute, broken only by the soft, hopeful chime of light from the branch in Elara's hand. She had gone into the dark a scared girl, marked by the enemy. She had returned a cleansed woman, bearing a legend made flesh. The balance of power in Aethervale had just shifted irrevocably, and Theron's cold eyes promised that his defeat here would only make the next move in his game more desperate and more deadly. Chapter 12. The Unwoven Song. Aurora's promise was a paradox. It held the concentrated power of a queen's sacrifice, a reservoir of pure creation magic, yet it lay dormant in Elara's hands, a beautiful, silent key waiting for the right lock. The days following the council were a frenzy of frustrated study. Elara, Kaelin, and a carefully selected handful of lore keepers, with Valeris as their watchful sentinel, pored over every surviving reference to Aurora and her work. The branch itself offered no further guidance. Its gentle light persisted, warming her palms and humming with latent potential, but it revealed no secret commands, no hidden runes. It was as if the weapon was waiting for something from her. The texts speak of a song of unmaking, not a destructive song, but one that unmakes corruption, that returns what is twisted to its true form. Aurora was a master of such harmonies, but the melody, it was never written down. It was born of the moment, of the need. So I just make up a song? Elara asked, frustration bleeding into her voice. She cradled the branch, feeling like a child given a royal scepter with no idea how to rule. What if I sing the wrong note? What if I unravel something that shouldn't be unraveled? That is the burden of such power, Valeris said quietly from her perch by the door. Precision, intent. Aurora did not have time for doubt. She sang the song her soul demanded to fight the darkness she faced. Yours will be different. It must be yours alone. The pressure was immense. The entire court watched, a mix of awe, hope, and lingering skepticism in their eyes. Theron's faction was quiet but not gone. They observed, waiting for her to fail, for the legendary weapon to prove itself a fairy tale in her mortal hands. The only progress came not from books, but from the heart tree. When Elara brought the branch near the great trunk, the tree's slow, deep pulse quickened. The veins of gold in its bark shimmered in sympathy with the veins in the wood. A single, clear note resonated in Elara's mind, a foundational tone, deep and sweet as roots drinking deep earth. It recognizes its kin, Kaelin observed with wonder in his voice. The promise was forged from the heartwood of its own ancestor. You are not just a wielder, Elara. You are a bridge between the weapon and the living heart of our realm. This connection sparked an idea. Instead of trying to command the branch, she began to meditate with it at the heart tree's base, letting her awareness drift between the ancient tree's vast, slow song and the quiet, focused potential of the branch. She listened for the dissonance, the places where the blight's corruption had thinned the music, like a sour note in a grand symphony. Days passed in quiet focus. Then, during a deep meditation, a vision came, not from the tree or the branch, but from the lingering echo of the blight mark that is now gone from her skin, but not from her memory. She saw the corrupted menhir again, the bleeding runes,
But this time she heard it, the song of the blight. It wasn't a melody at all. It was a silence, a vacuum that pulled at the edges of sound, trying to swallow it, an anti-song. Her eyes snapped open. "That's it," she breathed. "I don't need to create a new song. I need to fill the silence. I need to sing the note the blight is trying to steal." Kaelin, who had been keeping watch, knelt beside her. "Explain." "The blight is unmaking. It creates a void where life magic should be. Aurora's promise is pure creation. To fight it, I don't attack the void. I replace it. I pour the song back in." I looked at the branch, understanding dawning. It's not a sword to cut, it's a needle to weave, to mend the torn places in the world's song. It was a subtle but monumental shift in thinking, a weapon of healing, not violence. They devised a test. A small, intentionally corrupted patch of earth was cordoned off at the border, a place where the blight's seepage had killed a circle of ferns and turned the soil gray and lifeless. It was a risk. Using the weapon here could alert the enemy to its existence, but they had to know if it worked. Elara stood at the edge of the dead zone, the branch in her hands. Kaelin, Valeris, and a few trusted guards formed a silent perimeter. Her heart hammered. This was no desperate reactive power. This had to be deliberate, artful. She closed her eyes, finding the deep root note the heart tree had shown her. She held it in her mind. Then she reached out with her senses, listening for the silence in the dead earth. She found it, a cold, hollow ache in the fabric of life. Holding the root note steady, she poured her will into Aurora's promise. She didn't command it to do anything. She simply offered the note through it, like blowing across the mouth of a flawless flute. The branch responded. The golden veins blazed. A single, pure tone emanated from it, visible as a ripple of golden light in the air. It was the root note, but amplified, clarified, made more real than any natural sound. The ripple touched the dead earth.
Where the gray silence had been, the golden sound rushed in. It was a gentle but irresistible tide. The corrupted soil shuddered. The grayness didn't fight, it simply dissolved before the returning song, like shadow before a lit candle. Color returned, rich, dark brown. From the center, a single, vibrant green fern unfurled, then another and another, until the circle was not just healed, but thriving, lusher than the forest around it. The golden tone faded. The branch's light returned to its gentle glow. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the rustle of the newly restored ferns in the breeze. Then Kaelin let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob of relief. He looked at Elara, his eyes shining with a reverence that made her blush. "You did it! You unwove the silence!" "It was the weapon," she said softly, staring at the living proof of their theory. "It was you," Valeris corrected, a genuine smile on her face. "The weapon is the instrument. You are the musician. Aurora's song was one of final sacrifice. Yours is a song of restoration." The success was a thunderclap through Silverwood. The story of the healed circle spread, muting Theron's skeptics and igniting a fragile newfound hope in the court. Elara, the marked girl, was now Elara the Dawn Singer. But that night, in the privacy of her chambers, as she placed the gently glowing branch beside her bed, the vision returned. Not of the blight silence, but of the hooded figure at the breach, the two pinpricks of green light in the darkness. And this time, the figure wasn't looking at Kaelin. It was looking straight at her, through the memory. It raised a hand, not in attack, but in a mocking, slow clap. "A beautiful note, little singer." A voice, dry as dead leaves and cold as the vault, slithered into her mind. It was the same voice from the border, but now intimate, personal. "Come and sing for me in person. Let us make a duet of the ending of all things." The connection snapped. Elara stumbled back, gasping. The branch flared briefly, as if in warning. The victory at the border circle suddenly felt small, naive. They had tested a theory on a patch of dirt. The enemy had heard it, and it wasn't afraid. It was inviting her to play. The real battle wasn't about healing corrupted soil. It was about facing the source of the silence itself. And the source knew her name, her power, and now her song. The unwoven song had been found, but in playing its first note, she had rung a dinner bell for the darkness. Chapter 13, The Traitor's Gambit. The silent, psychic invitation from the Blight hung over Elara like a shroud. She told Kaelin, of course, his face turned to stone, the brief respite of their victory vanishing. It knows the weapon is active. It is baiting you, drawing you out. His hands clenched into fists. We must accelerate our plans, reinforce every ward, prepare the guard. It will come for the heart tree. It must. That is the source of Silverwood's song. A new grim energy seized Aethervale. Elara's days were spent in a grueling cycle, practicing her unweaving song on progressively larger patches of simulated corruption, meditating with the heart tree to strengthen her resonance, and learning basic Elven combat forms from Valeris, not to fight with a blade, but to move, to dodge, to survive. You must be more than a singer standing still. The Blight will not wait politely for your aria. Through it all, Aurora's promise was her constant companion. Its gentle light was a comfort, but also a constant reminder of the target on her back. The court's attitude toward her had solidified into two camps, those who saw her as their prophesied savior, and those, increasingly aligned with Theron, who saw her as a lightning rod for doom. It was during a strategy session in the map room, a chamber where the very floor was a living, topographical model of Silverwood, that the traitor struck. Kaelin, Elara, Valeris, and Captain Fenris of the Border Guard were hunched over the glowing model, discussing weak points in the net of wards. The northern line, by the Crystal Falls, is still fragile from the last breach. We've doubled patrols, but the land itself is reluctant to hold the magic there, as if the memory of the corruption lingers. We need to perform a major cleansing there, Kaelin said. Elara and I will go at first light. A demonstration of the promise's power might restore the land's trust and seal the ward permanently. A soft cough came from the doorway. Lord Theron stood there, holding a sealed scroll of silver bark. My apologies for the intrusion, my king. An urgent report from the Western Scouts. His demeanor was flawlessly respectful, but his eyes flickered to Elara with an unreadable glint. Kaelin took the scroll, breaking the seal. As he read, his face darkened. A sizable force of Blightwalkers gathering in the Whisper Marsh. They're not attacking, they're digging, tunneling. He looked up, alarm sharp in his eyes. They're trying to bypass the service wards entirely, come up through the roots. They're heading straight for the Heart Tree's eastern root system. The map room erupted in controlled panic. We must divert forces east immediately, Fenris barked. The northern cleansing is critical, Valeris countered. We cannot be in two places at once, Kaelin growled, his mind racing. He looked at Elara, torn. The eastern threat was direct and imminent, but leaving the northern ward weak was an invitation for a frontal assault. Theron stepped forward, his voice smooth. A difficult choice, my king. Perhaps the solution is division of strength. You are our greatest warrior, sire. Your presence at the Heart Tree is essential. The Dawn Singer, he gave a slight nod to Elara, has proven she can cleanse corruption. Let her take a contingent to the north to reinforce the ward. It is a less dangerous task, but vital. It would show the court your trust in her, and free you to lead the defense of our heart. It was a masterstroke, publicly offering his own guards, swearing an oath. To refuse would be to openly call Theron a liar in front of his captain and his advisor. It would split the court on the eve of battle.
Kaelin's jaw tightened. He looked at Elara, a silent question in his eyes. Do you trust this? She didn't. Not at all. But the eastern threat was real. The northern ward needed fixing, and Theron had boxed them in with flawless political maneuvering. To refuse would look like cowardice, or worse, like Kaelin was hoarding his weapon out of personal attachment.
She straightened her shoulders, clutching Aurora's promise. "I can do it," she said, her voice firm despite the fear. "The land knows me now. I can mend the ward." Kaelin searched her face for a long moment, then gave a sharp, reluctant nod. "Very well. At first light. Theron, you will command her guard. Her safety is your sole responsibility. Valeris, you will accompany them as my witness." Theron bowed. "As you command." His eyes met Elara's as he rose, and for a fraction of a second the mask slipped, not into hostility, but into something chillingly like satisfaction, the cat seeing the mouse walk into the arranged corner. The night before the departure was tense. Kaelin came to her chambers, his face etched with worry. "I do not like this. Sending you away, it feels wrong." "I'll have Valeris," Elara said, trying to sound confident, "and a whole company of guards." "Guards loyal to Theron," Kaelin muttered. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "If you sense anything amiss, you use the promise, not to mend the ward, but to protect yourself. Get to high ground, send a pulse of light into the sky. I will see it. I will come." He took her hand, his touch sending its usual resonance through her, now laced with urgency. "The weapon is important, Silverwood is important, but you—" He stopped, the unspoken words hanging between them, more potent than any vow. "I'll be careful," she whispered, her heart aching. He lifted her hand, his thumb brushing over the place where the blight mark had been. "You are the dawn, Elara. Do not let anyone, inside these woods or out, extinguish your light." At first light, the company assembled. 20 elves in Theron's forest green livery, their faces impassive. Valeris, looking wary, at Elara's side, and Theron himself, mounted on a sleek, antlered stag, looking every inch the noble commander. The journey north was silent, tense. The forest felt watchful, uneasy. When they reached the Crystal Falls, the site of the weakened ward, the wrongness was palpable. The air was too still. The beautiful, chiming waterfalls seemed muted. The menhir here was cracked, a hairline fracture from which a faint gray mist seeped. "Begin your work, Dawn Singer," Theron said, dismounting. "We will secure the perimeter." He gestured, and his guards fanned out, not facing outward to protect her, but forming a loose circle, around the worksite, around her. Elara exchanged a glance with Valeris, who gave a barely perceptible nod, her hand resting on the hilt of her dagger. Focusing, Elara approached the menhir. She planted Aurora's promise in the earth beside it, letting its light wash over the stone. She closed her eyes, seeking the root note, preparing to pour the unweaving song into the crack. Just as the first golden tone began to form on her lips, Farron's voice cut through the silence, calm and conversational. "You know, it's fascinating. The blight doesn't just consume life, it repurposes it. It finds the weakness, the fear, the hidden rot, and it magnifies it, turns it into a tool." Elara's eyes flew open. Farron was standing closer, just outside the ring of his guards, watching her with an academic curiosity. "What are you talking about?" Valeris snapped, stepping between them. "I'm talking about strategy, my dear Valeris," Farron said, a thin smile on his lips. "The king looks for an enemy outside. He forgets that the most effective corruption begins within." He nodded towards the menhir. "For instance, a ward isn't broken just by outside force. Sometimes it's subtly misdirected during its creation, a tiny flaw woven in centuries ago that waits for the right pressure to crack." Ice flooded Elara's veins. She looked at the menhir, at the crack. You sabotaged it?" "Sabotage is such a blunt word. I merely ensured there was a failsafe, a way to redirect energy. The blight's energy is so chaotic, so useless on its own, but channeled, focused through a pre-existing flaw in an ancient ward, well, it can become a very precise key, a key to unravel not just a ward, but the thing the ward protects. He raised a hand. The guards around them didn't move, but their stances shifted. They weren't guarding her from outsiders, they were ensuring no one left the circle. "You're working with it," Elara breathed, horror dawning. "The blight, you're the reason it knew where to breach. You're the reason it's coming." "Working with is inaccurate," Farron corrected, his voice dropping to a confidential whisper. "I am using it. Our people are fading, Valeris. We are a beautiful, dying relic. Kaelin clings to a dead past. This human girl offers a pathetic fantasy of connection. The blight offers transformation, a new kind of power, a merging. Silverwood will not die. It will be reborn, stronger, purged of weakness, starting with the sentimental heart tree and the mortal infection Kaelin insists on harboring. His plan was suddenly, terribly clear. He had lured her here, away from Kaelin. The eastern threat was likely a diversion. He would use her activation of the promise, channeled through the sabotaged ward, not to heal it, but to create a backlash, a directed surge of corrupted energy aimed like an arrow straight at the heart tree's most vulnerable root. He would use her power, Aurora's own legacy, to deliver the killing blow. "And you, my dear," Farron said, his eyes glinting with malice, "will be the tragic heroine who in her inexperience accidentally triggered the cataclysm, a cautionary tale about the dangers of mortal magic. How poetic!" Valeris lunged for Theron, but two guards caught her arms, holding her fast. Theron turned his smile to Elara. "Now, Dawn Singer, sing, fulfill your purpose, and watch as your song becomes the dirge for everything you love." Elara stood frozen, the promise glowing at her feet, not as a weapon, but as the trigger for annihilation. The traitor wasn't at the gates, he was in the circle, smiling, and she had walked right into his gambit. Chapter 14, The Dissonant Chord. The world narrowed to the crack in the menhir, Theron's cold smile, and the unending hum of impending catastrophe trapped within Aurora's promise. Elara's mind raced, a frantic cacophony against the trap's silent closing jaws. She couldn't sing the unweaving song. The corrupted ward would twist it into a killing pulse. But if she did nothing, Farron would kill her and Valeris, and find another way to trigger his sabotage. "You're a fool, Farron," Valeris spat, struggling against the guards. "You think the blight will let you be its master? It consumes. That is its only nature. You will be the first thing it devours after you hand it our heart." "Sentiment," Farron sighed, as if disappointed by a child's lack of vision. "The old world must burn for the new to rise."
"I am not afraid of the flame. I will be the spark that controls it." He nodded to Elara. "Time is short, girl. The king will be engaged in the east by now. No one is coming. Sing, or my guards will make your friend sing a different, final tune." One of the guards holding Valeris pressed a blade to her throat. Valeris went still, her eyes wide but defiant, locked on Elara's. "Think," Elara screamed at herself. The ward was flawed, designed to take a pure note of creation and invert it. But what if the note wasn't pure? What if it was broken? The memory of the blight's song, the hungry, pulling silence flashed in her mind. It was the opposite of the root note, an anti-note. Farron's sabotage was a filter expecting light. What if she fed it darkness instead? It was a terrible, desperate gamble. Pouring the blight's own essence into the ward could amplify it, cause an explosion right here, killing them all. Or it could overload the delicate, treacherous mechanism Farron had woven, corrupt the corruption. She had no other move.
Closing her eyes, she blocked out Theron, the guards, the blade at Valeris's throat. She reached not for the heart tree's deep root note, but into the cold, hollow memory space where the blight mark had festered. She found the echo of that silence, that void. It was repellent, a nausea in her soul. She gathered it, not as power to wield, but as a lump of poisoned clay. Then she opened her mouth, but she did not sing. She hummed. A low, dissonant, buzzing vibration that held no melody, only absence. It was the sound of a plucked string snapping, the sound of a choked breath. She pushed this awful non-sound through her connection to Aurora's promise. The branch reacted violently. The gentle dawn light snuffed out, replaced by a searing, painful white flash. The golden veins blackened for an instant. A screech of tortured magic tore from the menhir, not the clean tone of unweaving, but a deafening, grinding shriek of conflicting energies. The sabotaged ward, expecting a pure note of life, was instead force-fed a concentrated burst of anti-life. The flaw in its weaving couldn't process it. It was like pouring acid into a clockwork mechanism. The menhir didn't channel the energy, it rejected it. With a sound like a mountain cracking, the hairline fracture in the stone became a jagged canyon. The gray mist erupting from it turned black, then erupted in a backward blast of chaotic, unfocused energy, not toward the heart tree, but back along the path it was given. The backlash hit the circle of guards holding Valeris. They were elves, their magic attuned to the forest's song. The wave of scrambled, corrupted silence was anathema to them. They screamed, clutching their heads, their connection to the natural world violently short-circuited. They dropped their weapons and Valeris, collapsing to the ground, writhing in silent agony. Theron staggered back, his eyes wide with shock and fury. The backlash hadn't touched him directly, but his control of the situation had shattered. "What have you done?" he roared. Elara fell to her knees, gasping. Using the blight's echo had felt like swallowing poison. Her stomach churned, her magic felt frayed and sick. But the promise, after its momentary blackout, was glowing again, a fierce, angry red gold, like a healing wound. Valeris, free, didn't hesitate. She snatched a fallen guard's blade and was at Theron's throat in 2 heartbeats. "The gambit is over, traitor. Move a muscle and I paint the moss with your lies." But the disaster wasn't contained. The menhir, its internal sabotage now a raging instability, was acting like a lightning rod for the blight's ambient energy in the area. The gray mist from the crack thickened, coalescing into familiar, jerking forms. Blightwalkers, not summoned by the cloaked figure, but drawn spontaneously from the corrupted magic vomited up by the broken ward. They clawed their way out of the earth, their ember eyes fixing on the closest source of life, Elara. Theron saw his chance. "You see?" he hissed at Valeris, a mad light in his eyes. "Her chaos summons them. She is the catalyst." Elara forced herself to stand, gripping the promise. The branch was hot in her hands, vibrating with discordant energy. It was confused, wounded by what she had forced through it. She couldn't use the unweaving song. The area was now too saturated with chaotic corruption, and more walkers were forming every second. She had one option. The opposite of precision, the opposite of a song. She raised the branch high, not as a musician, but as a standard-bearer. Instead of seeking a note, she poured every ounce of her raw, untamed will into it. Not a melody, but a command. A single, primal impulse. Grow. Fight. Protect. Aurora's promise flared like a captured sun. But it didn't emit a note. The light that erupted from it was solid, tangible. It hit the ground and the forest answered, not with a song, but with a roar. The earth erupted, not with delicate ferns, but with a savage, instantaneous jungle. Thorns as thick as arms and sharp as spears shot up, impaling the forming walkers. Vines like muscular serpents lashed out, wrapping around torsos and limbs, crushing and pulling. Trees already centuries old groaned and leaned, their branches becoming battering rams, sweeping the clearing. It was not healing. It was the forest itself, awakened to a furious defensive rage. In the heart of the sudden violent verdance, Elara stood, the branch, the pulsating heart of the maelstrom. She was not singing. She was shouting without sound, directing the wrath of the living wood. Theron, held at blade point by Valeris, watched in utter devastated horror. His plan, his elegant sabotage, his vision of controlled transformation, it was being torn apart by the very life force he sought to pervert, wielded with a brutal, overwhelming force he had never imagined possible. The last of the spontaneous walkers were shredded by whipping branches. The chaotic energy around the men here was smothered, absorbed and digested by the explosive, aggressive growth. As suddenly as it began, the fury subsided. The new, monstrous plants settled, becoming part of the landscape, a permanent, thorny scar of the battle. Silence returned, heavy and stunned. The corrupted menhir was now half buried in aggressive, flowering brambles, neutralized. Elara swayed, the light of the promise dimming to its usual glow. She was drained to the marrow, her body trembling with exertion and the after-effects of channeling such raw, violent power. Valeris, her knuckles white on the dagger hilt, looked from the transformed clearing to Elara's pale, determined face. "By the roots of the world," she breathed. Then a new sound, the clear, silver call of a horn from the south. Kaelin's signal. The eastern diversion was over. He was coming. Theron heard it too. All the color drained from his face. His gamble had failed catastrophically. He was exposed, a traitor caught in the act, with Valeris as witness and a scene of devastation that spoke not of Elara's failure, but of her terrifying, unleashed potential. He looked at Elara, not with hatred now, but with a kind of horrified awe.
You didn't fix the song," he whispered. "You broke the instrument and made the forest itself your weapon." It was the realization of his deepest fear, not a controlled tool, but an unpredictable elemental force. Elara met his gaze, her voice hoarse but clear. "You tried to use a note to destroy a symphony. I reminded the symphony how to fight." The thunder of hoofbeats approached. Kaelin and a company of riders burst into the clearing, his face a mask of frantic fear that froze into shock as he took in the scene. The thorn-choked menhir, the cowed guards moaning on the ground, Valeris holding a blade to Theron's throat, and Elara standing amidst a fortress of her own making, Aurora's promise still glowing in her hand. His eyes found hers. In them she saw the storm of questions, the relief, the dawning comprehension of what she had done and the cost it had taken. The traitor was caught. The immediate threat was over, but as Kaelin dismounted and strode toward her, Elara knew the victory was acid-sweet. To save Silverwood, she hadn't woven a beautiful song. She had screamed and made the forest scream with her. She had proven herself not just a healer, but a weapon of terrifying, indiscriminate power. And as the adrenaline faded, leaving only cold exhaustion and the memory of the void she had channeled, she wondered if, in defeating Theron's corruption, she had let a little of the Blight's dissonance take root in her own soul. Chapter 15.
the Dawn's true name. The aftermath in the thorn-choked clearing was a silent, profound reckoning. Kaelin's guards swiftly secured the stunned traitors, their green livery a mockery against the savage, beautiful growth Elara had summoned. Lord Theron, his arrogance shattered into dust, offered no resistance as he was bound. His eyes, hollow with the ruins of his ambition, followed Elara as if she were a natural disaster given form, unpredictable, unstoppable. Kaelin went to Elara first, his hands hovering as if afraid to touch her, to find her real. "You are unharmed?" he whispered, the fear he'd carried from the east still raw in his eyes. She nodded, the motion making her dizzy. "The mark, I used its memory. I broke the ward instead of fixing it. I looked at the wild, defensive thicket now covering the men here. I didn't know if it would work. I made it fight." "You saved Silverwood," Valeris said firmly, releasing Theron to the guards. She wiped a smudge of dirt from her cheek, her gaze steady on Elara. "He would have turned your light into a spear aimed at our heart. You turned his own trap into a shield, a thorny, unpleasant shield, but a shield nonetheless." Kaelin's days swept over the evidence of her raw, desperate power, the violence of the growth, the sheer force of will it must have required. There was awe there, yes, but also a deep, new caution, not for her, but for her. "This power, it is not the gentle unweaving we envisioned." "No," Elara whispered, the admission painful. "It's not. It's messy. It's loud. It's the forest's anger, not its lullaby." She looked down at Aurora's promise, which now felt different in her grip, not just a key, but a conductor for forces far beyond a single song. "I'm not Aurora. I can't make a perfect sacrifice. I can only make and stand." Kaelin finally closed the distance, his hand coming to rest gently on her shoulder. The familiar resonance hummed between them, but it was changed, deepened by shared trauma and a hard-won truth. Aurora's promise was one note, perfect and final. Your power is the entire scale, the gentle growth and the fierce defense. The dawn does not apologize for the storm that clears the night. It simply arrives. He squeezed her shoulder. "You are not a weapon, Elara. You are a force, and you are ours." The return to Aethervale was a somber triumph. Theron's public arrest sent seismic waves through the court. His conspiracy, laid bare, extinguished the last embers of organized resistance to Elara's presence. She was no longer a controversial guest. She was the dawn singer who had uncovered a traitor and turned a blight trap into a fortress. But the victory was tempered. The Blight's master still lurked, its hunger now compounded by fury, and Elara bore the internal scars of her choice, the memory of wielding the void, the echo of the forest's rage in her own spirit. In the quiet days that followed, Kaelin began a new kind of training with her, not just control, but understanding. They walked the new, thorny grove she had created. "It is not corruption," he said, placing a hand on a vicious-looking thorn. "It is adaptation. The forest learned a new way to protect itself, through you. This is not a scar. It is a lesson grown into the earth." He taught her to listen to the new grove's song. It was not the heart tree's deep melody, nor the gentle hum of the meadows. It was a complex, discordant, but fiercely loyal harmony, a song of boundaries, of defiance, of resilient, prickly life. She learned to find its music, to appreciate its purpose. She had not broken nature's instrument, she had added a new, necessary chord to its symphony. The final confrontation, when it came, was not at the borders. The Blight denied its traitorous key and, faced with a unified, awakened forest, made a desperate, direct assault on the heart tree itself. It poured its essence into a single, monstrous avatar, a towering, writhing form of graying roots and shattered stone, with the hooded figure's pinpoint eyes burning at its core. It screamed its silence against the living song of the grove. The battle was terrible. Elven warriors fought with silver light and swift blades against the crushing, draining presence. Kaelin was a whirlwind of devastating grace, but the Avatar was a creature of negation, unraveling magic where it struck. Elara stood with Kaelin before the heart tree, Aurora's promise in hand. She did not try to sing a single pure note. She listened. She heard the heart tree's weary, ancient melody. She heard the defiant, thorny song of her grove. She heard the clean, sharp note of Kaelin's magic, and the brave, scattered harmonies of every elf and creature fighting. She understood then. Her role was not to sing over them. It was to be the conductor. She raised the branch, and this time she did not push her will into it. She offered it as a focal point. She poured her awareness into the network of life around her, and through Aurora's promise, she connected them. She wove the heart tree's enduring strength with the thorn grove's defiant anger, with Kaelin's focused power, with the courage of the warriors. She didn't force a new song. She amplified the song that was already there, weaving the disparate, struggling notes into a single, thunderous chord of unified will. The promise blazed, not with its own light, but with the combined, focused light of all Silverwood. The golden beam that shot forth was not a weapon of unmaking. It was a declaration of being, a consolidated no to the silence.
It struck the Blight Avatar. There was no explosion. There was resolution. The screaming silence met the united song and simply ceased to be. The graying roots crumbled to fertile soil. The stone shattered to harmless gravel. The pinprick eyes flared once with shock, then winked out forever. Their final, silent curse lost in the triumphant, ringing chorus of life. The blight was gone, not sealed, not banished, healed, unmade by the very wholeness it sought to destroy. In the ringing silence that followed, Elara lowered the branch. The connections faded, leaving her profoundly weary but whole. No void inside her, only the peaceful exhaustion of a task completed. She looked at Kaelin. He was staring at her, his face illuminated not by magic, but by an understanding so deep it needed no words. She had not fought alone. She had helped them all fight together. The recovery of Silverwood was a quiet, joyful blooming. The thorn grove remained, a beautiful, rugged memorial that became a place of pilgrimage, not to a weapon, but to the idea that protection could be fierce and gentle at once. Elara's place was no longer that of a student or a weapon, but as a guardian of the song in all its forms. One evening, years later, she stood with Kaelin on a balcony grown from the heart tree's own branches, looking over a Silverwood that was more vibrant, more connected than it had been in centuries. The stars were bright, the forest's song a peaceful, complex lullaby. "You never gave it a name," Kaelin said softly, his hand finding hers, the resonance between them a constant, comforting hum. "I don't think it needs one. It's not my song. It's ours. It's Silverwood's." She looked up at him, a smile touching her lips. "But if I had to name it, I'd call it Homecoming, because that's what it was. For me, for the forest, for you." He brought her hand to his lips, a gesture of reverence and profound love. "Then welcome home, Elara Ashborne, not as a dawn, nor a singer, nor a weapon." He kissed her knuckles, his eyes holding hers. "Welcome home as yourself, finally and forever." And under the starlight, with the living wood strong beneath them, and the healed forest singing softly all around, the lost girl and the lonely king stood together, two notes in a harmony finally made complete. The promise had been kept, not through a single sacrifice, but through a shared strength, And in that strength, they had found not just victory, but a truth more powerful than any magic, that the truest defense against any darkness is not a wall, nor a blade, but the unbreakable bond of a chosen family, singing the same song, in the same key, at last. If this journey through Silverwood touched your heart, please let the channel know by liking this video. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What was your favorite moment? Did the ending bring you peace? Your support helps us continue to craft these complete, immersive tales. Subscribe so you never miss the beginning of the next adventure. Until then, may you always find your harmony, and may your own story have a dawn as bright as this one. Thank you for listening.